body under the bed. The body under the bed is one of those terrifying stories that feels too nightmarish to be real until you find out it is. The tale usually begins the same. An unsuspecting traveler checks into a hotel room after a long day of travel. The air is stale, but the fatigue is stronger than the urge to complain. As they lay down to sleep, a strange smell lingers. It's foul, cloying, impossible to ignore. The staff brushes it off. Housekeeping assures it's nothing. The guest tries to sleep anyway. Eventually, the odor becomes unbearable. A call is made, a knock on the door, and then the bed is lifted. Underneath the mattress, stuffed in the boxed frame, lies a decaying corpse. This has happened multiple times in Las Vegas, New Jersey, Kansas City, and beyond. Real hotel guests have unknowingly slept just inches above the rotting remains of murdered victims. Some laid there for days, others even complained about the smell only to be dismissed. The victims are often sex workers, runaways, forgotten people in a world that moves too quickly to notice the missing. The psychological horror doesn't just come from the corpse. It's the proximity, the intimacy, the violation of a safe space. Your bed, your haven, transformed into a tomb. The idea that you could be so close to death, to evil, and never know. That you could sleep peacefully while horror seeps into the mattress below. It forces you to question your surroundings, your safety, your assumptions. It's not just a ghost story. It's an existential one. Real Candyman. The Real Candyman wasn't a ghost story whispered at sleepovers. He was a living, breathing nightmare named Dean Corll. In the early 1970s, in a seemingly quiet Texas neighborhood, Corll gained a reputation as the kind man who handed out sweets from his family's candy factory. Children knew him, trusted him. Parents thought nothing of the smiling man who gave their sons free treats. But beneath that sugary surface lived something unspeakable. With the help of 2 teenage accomplices, Corll abducted, tortured, and murdered at least 28 boys. Lured with promises of parties, alcohol, and drugs, the victims disappeared into a hellish trap, often taken to a nondescript house where the walls never echoed their screams. What makes this story more terrifying than fiction is how long it lasted. For years, no one noticed. Boys went missing, families begged for help, but authorities dismissed the runaways as troubled teens. Corll had charm. He had a face people trusted. He used it like a mask, and the mask worked. That's what chills you. The evil wasn't hiding in the shadows. It was shaking hands with neighbors and handing out candy at school. The horror finally ended when one of his accomplices turned on him, shooting him dead and revealing the unimaginable. A rented boat shed filled with tortured remains, some still bound, their names never spoken again. The betrayal was complete, not just of the victims, but of a community that had trusted a monster dressed in sweetness. The Candyman didn't just kill children, he killed innocence, killer in the back seat. The story begins like any ordinary night. Dim street lights, the hum of traffic, a woman driving home alone. She's tired, focused on the road, maybe humming along to the radio. Then headlights appear behind her, bright, persistent, too close. She changes lanes. They follow. The lights flash, high beams, on, off, again. Her heart begins to pound. The driver behind her seems frantic, erratic, even dangerous. Panicked, she pulls into a gas station and runs inside. The stranger barrels in after her, but not to hurt her. He screams, "There's someone in your back seat." This isn't an urban legend born from fiction. This has happened. In multiple cases, attackers have hidden in the back seats of cars, lying silently behind unsuspecting drivers, waiting for the right moment to strike. One woman in the 1990s survived only because a trucker noticed the silhouette in her rear window and kept flashing his lights to warn her. In another case, the driver wasn't so lucky. Her body was discovered with the seats soaked in blood and no signs of forced entry, just the horror of her own car being turned into a coffin. What makes this legend so psychologically violent is the betrayal of the mundane. A car is a personal space, a bubble of control. We glance in mirrors, lock doors, and yet the killer waits behind us, silent, patient, breathing in the dark. It isn't just about murder, it's about vulnerability, about the illusion of safety, about how sometimes the danger isn't ahead of you, it's already with you, just waiting, watching, inches away. Cropsy was the name whispered by children across Staten Island, a boogeyman who lived in the shadows of abandoned buildings, snatching kids who wandered too far from home. He was said to be an escaped mental patient with a hook for a hand, lurking in the ruins of the Willowbrook State School. For decades, parents used the tale to keep their kids close. It was just a story, until it wasn't. In the 1980s, the myth of Cropsy bled into terrifying reality. Children actually began disappearing, one by one, their photos plastered on telephone poles, their names screamed into the void. At the center of the nightmare stood Andre Rand, a former Willowbrook employee with a chilling past. Rand had once been institutionalized, then quietly worked among the vulnerable. He lived in the woods near the crumbling asylum, his camp littered with bones, toys, and fragments of lost childhoods. Police eventually arrested him for the kidnapping of a 12-year-old girl with disabilities. Her body was never found. Others remain missing. No one knows how many lives he took. What sickens the soul is that he didn't need to wear a mask or carry a hook. He didn't have to hide in myths. He became the myth. The evil that was once pretend turned out to be heartbreakingly human. The story of Cropsy isn't just a tale told in the dark. It's a real scar left on a grieving community, a reminder that monsters aren't always made of smoke and stories. Sometimes they walk beside us. Sometimes they smile. The Watcher is not a ghost story passed down through generations. It's a living nightmare that unfolded in 2014 when a New Jersey family thought they'd found their dream home, a beautiful Dutch colonial in a peaceful suburb. But as they began settling in, the dream dissolved into dread. Letters started arriving, handwritten, unnerving, signed by someone who called themselves the Watcher. The letters weren't vague. They mentioned the family's children by nickname, described renovations inside the house, and asked chilling questions. Who has the bedrooms facing the street? I am pleased to know their names now. The Watcher claimed to be part of a bloodline tasked with watching the house for generations. They said they had waited for years for young blood to return. The messages became more threatening. Have they found what is in the walls yet? One read. The family was paralyzed. Police investigated. Neighbors were questioned. DNA was tested. But nothing. No arrests. No closure. Just the house. Silent, sinister, unsellable. The owners never moved in. Their lives became consumed by fear, suspicion, and court battles. Strangers drove by to see the cursed home. The town whispered. The house stared back. What makes the Watcher story so deeply haunting is its intimacy. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't violence. It was someone watching, someone close, someone obsessed with your children, your habits, your breath. It's the realization that your sanctuary has eyes, that even when the doors are locked and the curtains drawn, someone might still be watching, waiting, smiling, buried alive. Few fears strike as deeply as being buried alive. The thought of waking in darkness, soil pressing against your chest, screaming into silence as the air runs thin. For centuries, people feared it so intensely that they invented safety coffins with bells or tubes that allowed the mistakenly buried to signal for help. That fear wasn't irrational. It was born from truth. In the 18th and 19th centuries, being buried alive was tragically common. Without modern medical equipment, doctors often mispronounced death. Victims of cholera or catalepsy, whose heartbeats had slowed, were placed in coffins and lowered into the earth while still alive. Grave diggers would later reopen tombs, only to find claw marks inside lids, broken fingernails, and twisted bodies that had clearly awoken far too late. Some coffins were so violently disturbed that their wooden interiors were shredded in desperate attempts to escape. In one infamous case, a woman in South Carolina was exhumed after townsfolk heard muffled cries. She had turned in her coffin, her fingers bloody, her mouth open in a final scream. She died again, but this time from terror and suffocation, just inches from salvation. What makes this horror so visceral is its helplessness. No killer, no monster, just time, dirt, and abandonment. It's a death born of error, of being forgotten too soon. The silence after the last scream is what haunts us. The idea that someone could be buried, not because they were gone, but because no one looked closely enough to see they were still there, still breathing, still alive. Human meat burgers. In 2014, a quiet buzz turned into a media firestorm in the small Nigerian town of Anambra. Inside a modest roadside hotel, guests had been raving about the food, particularly the burgers, spiced just right, juicy, memorable. But beneath the sizzling satisfaction was something far more sinister. When local authorities raided the establishment, what they found wasn't just a kitchen, it was a crime scene, a room drenched in blood, an arsenal of weapons, and most horrifying of all, human heads, wrapped and stored, ready for preparation. Patrons had unknowingly consumed human flesh, real people turned into meat. One clergyman who'd eaten at the hotel recalled feeling a wave of nausea upon learning the truth. "I'm ashamed I didn't know," he said. But how could he? The food was expertly prepared, the staff polite. There were no screams, no signs of violence, just silence and seasoning, and that's what makes it unforgettable. The psychological violence isn't just the cannibalism, it's the betrayal, the way something as comforting and universal as food can become a vessel for horror. These weren't desperate acts of survival. They were acts of profit, deception, and consumption. Flesh turned into business. The idea that you could sit down for a warm meal and unknowingly ingest the suffering of another human being rips away the illusion of normalcy. It makes you question trust, the safety of strangers, even your senses. We think we know what's on our plate. We think we know the line between civilization and savagery. But sometimes that line isn't crossed. It's swallowed whole. The Green Man. The legend of the Green Man haunted the roads of Pennsylvania for decades. Teenagers would dare each other to drive deep into the countryside, to darkened tunnels and forgotten back roads, hoping to catch a glimpse of the glowing figure said to walk alone at night, face melted, skin green, electricity flickering wherever he passed. He was whispered to be a ghost, or maybe a mutant, or the result of some failed government experiment. But the truth behind the Green Man is more heartbreaking than terrifying, and all too human. His name was Raymond Robinson. As a boy in 1919, Raymond suffered a horrific accident after climbing a power line to reach a bird's nest. A surge of 11,000 volts seared his face and chest. He survived, but barely. The injuries left him blind, disfigured, and isolated from a world that couldn't bear to look at him. During the day, he stayed hidden, but at night he walked, for miles. Along quiet roads with his walking stick in hand, he found freedom in the darkness, away from the cruelty of stairs and gas. Locals began to see him. Some mocked him. Others offered cigarettes or took photos. Many feared him, not because of who he was, but because of what he looked like. They gave him names. Charlie No Face, the Green Man. A real man turned myth because the truth made people uncomfortable. Raymond never harmed anyone. He only wanted to walk in peace. Yet in trying to reclaim his life, he became the thing people told stories about. A living legend, a misunderstood soul trapped in the folklore of fear. Organ theft, it sounds like the stuff of tabloid fear-mongering. A tourist wakes up in a bathtub full of ice, dazed, nauseous, with a crudely stitched wound on their back. A note rests nearby. Call 911. Your kidney has been removed. Most dismiss this as a chilling urban myth, a modern cautionary tale for those traveling alone. But the horror is real, and worse, it's organized. Across the globe, reports have emerged of people, especially the vulnerable, being drugged, abducted, and waking up to find their organs harvested. In India, doctors ran illegal kidney rackets, convincing laborers to donate under false pretenses. In Egypt, asylum seekers have been butchered for the black market. In China, prisoners of conscience, reportedly from groups like Falun Gong, have had their bodies systematically harvested to supply transplant demand. What makes this terrifying isn't just the act, it's how calculated it is. This is not random violence. This is industry-level horror, a system where human bodies are stripped for parts and sold to the highest bidder, where life is assigned a dollar value based on blood type and tissue compatibility, where someone's heart, liver, or eyes can be worth more than their existence. Organ theft dismantles our most basic belief, that our bodies belong to us, that even in death, there's dignity. But in this world, the poor become inventories, the desperate become supply. The idea that you could be used, opened, and sold without your knowledge is more than unsettling. It's a nightmare we've allowed to grow in the shadows, because confronting it means admitting that monsters don't need fangs, just scalpels and silence. Haunted Dybbuk Box. The Dybbuk Box is more than a cursed antique. It's a vessel of pure dread, a small wooden wine cabinet that has left a trail of nightmares, illness, and ruin in its wake. Its origins are soaked in sorrow, allegedly owned by a Holocaust survivor who used it to trap a Dybbuk, a malicious spirit from Jewish folklore, one that latches onto the living to torment and possess. It sounds like something out of a horror film, but the documented events that follow this box are chillingly real. When antique dealer Kevin Mannis purchased the box at an estate sale in 2001, he thought he'd found a unique piece of history. What he brought home instead was a waking nightmare. Lights shattered, doors slammed. He and those around him suffered from hair loss, strange bruises, choking nightmares, and overwhelming feelings of dread. Everyone who came into contact with the box reported terrifying phenomena: smells of ammonia and jasmine, shadowy figures in the corner of their eyes, and dreams of a demonic hag. Even hardened skeptics broke down. The box changed hands multiple times, and with every new owner came new horrors. One man even suffered a stroke shortly after taking possession. When it was finally sealed and hidden away in a military-grade container, silence returned. But the fear never left. It's now locked in a paranormal museum under surveillance, untouched. What makes the Dybbuk Box so disturbing isn't just the legend, it's the people who swore their lives unraveled the moment they opened it. A simple object, a dark secret, a door that should never have been unlocked. Man with Hooks. The story often begins on a lover's lane. Two teens parked under moonlight, windows fogged, radio low. A broadcast interrupts the music. A dangerous escapee has fled a nearby asylum. He's described as violent, unstable, and missing one hand, replaced by a rusted steel hook. Fear ripples through the couple. The girl begs to leave. The boy resists. Something scrapes the car. They speed away. Later, when they arrive home, the girl opens her door and screams. Hanging from the door handle is a bloodied hook. For decades, this tale has circulated as folklore, a morality warning disguised as fear. But the disturbing truth is that this wasn't entirely fiction. Across the United States, especially in the 1950s and 60s, there were real cases of violent patients escaping psychiatric institutions. In some instances, they attacked innocent people, often couples in isolated areas where help was far and fear was near. In one verified case from 1957, a young woman was murdered while out with her boyfriend in a secluded park. The attacker was a former patient who had escaped just days prior. He was found later, ranting about voices and justice. Another case involved a war veteran who lost a hand and replaced it with a hook-like prosthetic. After his release from a facility, he was linked to a series of roadside assaults, some fatal, some never solved. The man with the hook is terrifying, not just because of what he represents, but because he existed, perhaps not as a single figure, but as a shadow stitched together from real horrors, not a ghost, not a legend, but flesh, trauma, metal, and rage. The Smiling Man. The Smiling Man isn't a ghost or a demon from ancient folklore. He's a real man seen walking under city lights, his smile stretching too wide, too long, too fixed. It began with a simple encounter in Seattle, where a man recounted walking home alone late at night. The streets were empty, silent, but then he saw him, a man in a suit, tall and unnaturally thin, dancing erratically under a street lamp. His movements were fluid, yet broken, like a puppet strung too tight. He smiled, this enormous, grotesque grin, and began following the witness with no words, no sound, only the unrelenting joy frozen on his face. When the man crossed the street, the Smiling Man followed. When he stopped, the Smiling Man mimicked. No phone, no laughter, no explanation, just the smile. It wasn't an isolated incident. Across the country, people began reporting eerily similar encounters. Strangers walking with a disjointed, almost rehearsed rhythm, grinning like wax figures melting in the heat. They don't speak, they don't blink, some laugh, some follow, some just stare. What disturbs isn't violence, it's the intent you can't place. The terror is in the unknown. Why is he smiling? What does he want? Is he human or something wearing the skin of one? The Smiling Man is a manifestation of a deeper fear, that danger doesn't always come with a snarl or a scream. Sometimes it wears joy as a mask. Sometimes it dances toward you under flickering lights. Sometimes it doesn't need to touch you to haunt you forever. Ghost Ship Mary Celeste. The Mary Celeste was found adrift in the Atlantic Ocean in 1872, its sails full, its hull intact, its cargo untouched, and not a soul on board. The lifeboat was missing, but the weather had been calm. No signs of struggle, no blood, no violence. It was as if the entire crew had simply vanished into thin air. The captain, his wife, their 2-year-old daughter, and 7 experienced sailors, all gone. The ship's log was still in place, the last entry routine. Food was still on the table, clothing untouched in trunks. The cargo, over 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol, was virtually untouched. Nothing was stolen. There were no distress signals. The Mary Celeste was in perfect sailing condition, gliding silently with a ghostly elegance when it was discovered by another vessel. Theories ran wild. Pirates? No valuables taken. Mutiny? No blood, no signs of resistance. A seaquake? There was no evidence. Some said the crew had gone mad from alcohol fumes. Others whispered of sea monsters or alien abduction. One of the most chilling theories, they abandoned ship thinking it was sinking, only to perish adrift in a lifeboat that no one ever found. But the truth remains unknown. What haunts us is the silence, the idea that something could steal away an entire crew without a scream, a splash, a sign, that a family could sit down for breakfast and simply be erased. The Mary Celeste is more than a ship. It's a ghost frozen in time, sailing forever in the imagination, a riddle carved into the sea that no one will ever solve. The Silent Twins. June and Jennifer Gibbons were born together, and from their first breath, they lived in a world no one else could enter. Born to Caribbean immigrants in Wales in 1963, they were the only black children in their school, mocked, isolated, and rejected by peers. In response, the twins turned inward, so far inward that they stopped speaking to anyone else. They created their own private language, a fast, whispered code no outsider could understand. It wasn't just speech they shared, it was breath, thought, identity. The two became shadows of each other. They moved in unison. They mirrored every motion. If one stopped eating, so did the other. If one smiled, the other followed, but what looked like a sacred bond was laced with something far darker. In their journals, they wrote of a love so obsessive it became violent. They confessed to hating each other as much as they needed one another, trapped in a pact no one could break. They began committing crimes, arson, vandalism, theft, hoping perhaps to break free from their mirrored prison. Eventually, they were institutionalized at Broadmoor, a high-security psychiatric hospital, where they stayed for 11 years. Doctors tried to separate them. It only made things worse. The silence grew heavier, darker. Then one day, Jennifer whispered a chilling confession to June. "I'm going to have to die so you can live." And she did. Suddenly, without cause, her heart simply stopped. After Jennifer's death, June began to speak, fluently, normally, as if one life had been exchanged for the other. The twins weren't haunted, they were the haunting. The Choking Doberman. Of a couple returns home from a late night out, their loyal Doberman greeting them at the door, tail wagging, then suddenly gagging. Panicked, they rush the dog to an emergency vet. Hours pass in agonizing silence. Finally, the vet calls, "Your dog's choking on human fingers." The words hang in the air like a scream. Terrified, the couple calls the police and rushes back home. They'd left the door unlocked. Officers search the house and find a bleeding intruder unconscious in the bedroom closet, missing several fingers. He had broken in while they were gone, hiding in silence, waiting to attack or escape. But the Doberman had found him first. Most people hear this story and shiver, convinced it's one of those gruesome modern myths. But versions of it have happened. In Australia, a man was found mauled in a home by a dog that had attacked him during a botched burglary. In the U.S., emergency vets have discovered foreign objects in choking pets, objects that led to the arrest of criminals hiding or fleeing. What grips the heart is not just the gore, it's the betrayal of peace. Your dog, your home, your sanctuary, all violated by a hidden threat, one that crept inside without a sound. You slept, you relaxed, and danger breathed the same air. And the only thing that stood between life and death, an animal you fed that morning, who couldn't speak, but warned you in blood. The Doberman didn't just choke on fingers, it chewed through a lie of safety, exposing the predator already inside. Devil's Chair. At first glance, it's just a stone bench nestled within a cemetery, worn by time, unassuming still, but locals whisper it holds more than silence. They call it the Devil's Chair. Some say if you sit in it at midnight, you'll hear the devil whisper in your ear. Others claim that if you leave a beer on it overnight, it will be empty by morning, drained by something unseen. Every small town has its version, but this story isn't just folklore. Across America, real mourning chairs exist in graveyards, and with them, a trail of terror. The most infamous sits in Cassadaga, Florida, near a spiritualist camp known for its eerie energy and ghostly sightings. Over the years, the chair has been linked to strange events, visitors collapsing after sitting in it, unexplainable chills, visions of shadows lurking among the gravestones. Some who mocked the legend reported accidents soon after. Others who dared to sit in defiance spoke of dreams filled with screams or a creeping dread that followed them home like a cold breath on the back of the neck. What makes the Devil's Chair more than just a spooky prop is how the human mind reacts to the sacred and the forbidden. These benches were once built for grieving widows, placed at the resting place of a lost love, but sorrow leaves an imprint. Grief is a residue. Over time, those tears and whispered prayers morph into myth, and something begins to answer back. You don't need to believe in devils to feel watched when you sit in that chair. You just need to sit and wait. Room 1046. In January 1935, a man checked into the hotel president in Kansas City under the name Roland T. Owen. He brought no luggage, wore a dark overcoat, and carried only a comb, a toothbrush, and nothing else. He was quiet, his behavior odd. He insisted the room remain dark, kept the blinds closed, the lights dim. Hotel staff reported unsettling conversations overheard through the walls, whispers, arguments, pauses of deep silence, then more voices, muffled and urgent. Days later, Owen was found brutally beaten in room 1046, tied up, bloodied, naked, stabbed, his skull fractured, still alive, barely breathing. When asked who had done this to him, he whispered, "Nobody." Hours later, he was dead. There was no sign of forced entry. The room was locked from the inside. The phone was ripped from the wall. Bloody fingerprints were found. None matched any guess. Investigators discovered the name Roland T. Owen was fake. No one knew who he was. They buried him as a John Doe. A year later, someone sent money anonymously for a proper funeral. Flowers arrived with a note, "Love forever, Louise." Who was Louise? Why would he protect his killer with his last breath? Why did he check in under false names at multiple hotels before? Why was his room kept in darkness? The mystery of room 1046 isn't just unsolved. It feels orchestrated, as if someone carefully curated the terror. It's a room that holds its secrets like a locked box, and every time the key comes close, the door vanishes. What truly happened in room 1046 may never be known, but the silence it left behind screams louder than any confession. Helltown, Ohio. Helltown wasn't always a place that curdled your blood. It was once called Boston Township, a quiet, woodsy village in Summit County, Ohio. But in the 1970s, the government suddenly bought up nearly every property in town. One by one, families were forced to leave, homes were boarded up, churches emptied, streets fell silent, and then, without explanation, they closed the entire town. Signs went up, roads were barricaded, locals were told to stay away. No answers were given, only whispers. That silence birthed something monstrous. People began to talk about satanic cults meeting in the churches, about mutated animals wandering the woods, twisted by chemical spills, about ghostly children seen staring from house windows that were supposed to be abandoned. One chapel, they said, had upside-down crosses carved into its door. A hearse, unmanned, roamed the forest roads at night. The stories grew darker with every retelling, but underneath them was a chilling truth. Something had happened there. The government had declared eminent domain to create a national park, but they never finished. Buildings were left to rot. A chemical dump site nearby had leaked toxic waste. People had gotten sick. Pets were born deformed. Trees refused to grow in certain patches of land. And whether through truth or trauma, those left behind began to speak of shadows that moved when no one was there. Helltown became more than a name. It became a scar, a place where community was torn out at the root and left to fester. It's what happens when silence replaces explanation and fear is allowed to ferment. The devil didn't build Helltown, we did. The Wendigo. The Wendigo is not just a legend, it's a hunger made flesh, born from the frozen wilderness of Algonquian folklore. It is said to be a towering creature with sunken eyes, stretched skin over brittle bones, and a voice like cracking ice. But beneath its monstrous form lies something far more terrifying, the echo of human desperation. The Wendigo is a person who, in a moment of starvation and madness, consumed another, and in doing so, became something inhuman. This isn't just myth. Throughout history, during brutal North American winters, isolated communities faced unthinkable choices. In 1878, Swift Runner, a Cree man, was found to have killed and eaten his entire family during the winter, despite being just 25 miles from a Hudson's Bay outpost. He claimed a Wendigo had taken hold of him. The truth was even darker. He had become it. The Wendigo isn't just a story to scare children into behaving. It's a reflection of what happens when civilization collapses under survival. It's the face of hunger that devours morality. When the snow falls deep enough and help is too far, something ancient wakes inside us. It whispers that the rules don't matter, that survival is holy, that flesh is just food. This creature doesn't roam the woods. It sleeps in the back of the mind, waiting for the right storm, the perfect hunger, the final breakdown of the self. And when it arrives, it takes more than lives. It takes souls. The Wendigo isn't a monster from outside. It's what we become when we forget what it means to be human. Killer clowns. They began as a joke, a viral prank. Clowns spotted standing silently at the edge of forests under street lamps, holding balloons in the dead of night. What started on social media in 2016 quickly spiraled into a worldwide panic. Schools closed, police were called, children cried themselves to sleep. But behind the makeup and rubber masks, something real and deeply sinister was lurking, because not all the clowns were pretending. In places like Greenville, South Carolina, children reported clowns trying to lure them into the woods with money. In Pennsylvania, a teenager was stabbed to death during a clown confrontation. In Wisconsin, clowns were seen carrying knives. These weren't just actors. Some of them had intentions far darker than a jump scare. The fear was primal. Clowns, once symbols of joy, had become icons of dread. Their frozen grins, their painted faces, their inhuman laughter, it all felt wrong, familiar yet corrupted. And that's why the horror hit so hard. Because when you take something meant to comfort and twist it into something that stalks you under moonlight, you're not just afraid, you're betrayed. The clown sightings died down, but the fear never really left. Police confirmed dozens of credible threats. Arrests were made, weapons were found. Not every clown was a killer, but enough were to prove that the nightmare was no longer just in our heads. Sometimes evil doesn't hide in shadows. Sometimes it dances in bright red shoes with a painted smile, and it's watching you from the tree line, waiting for you to laugh before it steps into the road. Toxic Lady. On the night of February 19th, 1994, Gloria Ramirez was rushed to Riverside General Hospital in California. She was just 31 years old, suffering from late-stage cervical cancer. But nothing prepared the hospital staff for what would unfold next. As nurses tried to stabilize her, they noticed her body was coated in a strange, oily sheen. Her breath smelled of something sickly sweet, like garlic and fruit. When they drew blood, it shimmered with an odd, almost crystalline quality. Then, the ER fell into chaos. One nurse collapsed, then another. A third began to shake uncontrollably. In total, 23 hospital workers became violently ill. 5 were hospitalized. Some stopped breathing. They hadn't touched her blood. They had only been near it. Gloria Ramirez died that night, but her death was only the beginning of the nightmare. The emergency room had to be evacuated. Hazmat teams were called in. Investigators, stunned, found no biological or chemical weapons. Theories ran rampant. Meth lab explosion, nerve agent exposure, a government cover-up. Nothing stuck, and the deeper they looked, the stranger it got. The final theory, never proven, was that Ramirez had been using dimethyl sulfoxide, a home remedy for pain, which may have chemically altered inside her body, creating a poisonous gas when exposed to oxygen and electricity from defibrillators. But it was just a theory. No one could say for sure. What remains is the horrifying image of a woman whose very body became a weapon, a vessel of mystery and death. Gloria was dying, yes, but even in death she was untouchable, unknowable, a human surrounded by panic, a toxic ghost whose presence still leaves questions no science can fully answer. Suicide Forest. At the foot of Mount Fuji lies Aokigahara, a sea of tangled trees and ancient silence. Known to many as the Suicide Forest, it holds a reputation so chilling that signs at its entrance plead with visitors to reconsider. Your life is a precious gift. But the forest does not plead. It waits. Each year, dozens of people enter its dense, moss-covered paths with no intention of returning. Some come with sleeping bags, others with ropes. Many leave behind notes, shoes, or nothing at all. The trees, thick, winding, and soundless, swallow every trace of life. Even birds refuse to sing here. Compasses spin wildly due to the magnetic minerals in the volcanic soil. And for those who have wandered too deep, there is only stillness. What makes Aokigahara more than a location is the way it lures the suffering. It is not loud, it does not scream, it offers quiet, a final breath without judgment. The forest has become so infamous that local volunteers conduct regular searches for bodies. They often find tents strung between trees, photos of loved ones pinned to branches, bones scattered beneath beds of moss. Some say the forest is cursed by ancient spirits. Others believe it merely reflects what we refuse to see, the depth of loneliness, the weight of pain, the silence of unresolved sorrow. And within that silence, people vanish, not with violence, but with heartbreak. Aokigahara doesn't haunt with ghosts. It haunts with absence, with unanswered questions, with the realization that the scariest thing isn't what's hiding in the dark, it's why we go looking for it. Amityville Horror. The house at 112 Ocean Avenue stood quiet in the early morning hours of November 13, 1974. Inside, 6 members of the DeFeo family lay shot in their beds, killed as they slept. Only the eldest son, Ronald DeFeo Jr., survived because he was the one who pulled the trigger. One by one, he executed his parents and siblings with a rifle. No signs of struggle. No one ran. No one screamed. Just silence and death. He claimed voices made him do it. A year later, the Lutz family moved into the now vacant colonial home. They lasted 28 days. In that short time, they reported disembodied voices, walls bleeding a dark ooze, and windows shattering on their own. A crucifix spun upside down. Their daughter began talking to an unseen, red-eyed pig named Jody. George Lutz claimed he would wake at 3:15 a.m., the exact time of the DeFeo murders, and feel an overwhelming urge to check the boathouse. They fled in terror, leaving all their belongings behind. Skeptics call it a hoax. Investigators picked holes in the timeline, but something about Amityville never let go. Maybe it's because the horror was already real before the hauntings began. 6 people were murdered where children once played. A family was slaughtered in their beds. And then something else took root. Whether it was grief, guilt, or something darker, the air in that house changed. Amityville isn't scary because of ghosts. It's scary because evil made itself comfortable there and didn't leave. It fed on blood first, then fear, then myth. Cemetery knock. The sound was soft at first, a dull thud, then another, rhythmic, like knuckles brushing against wood. For grave diggers and caretakers in the 18th and 19th centuries, this wasn't just superstition, it was a terrifying reality. People were being buried alive. Before modern medicine could accurately determine death, cases of premature burial were shockingly common. A person in a coma, suffering from catalepsy or deep illness, might appear dead. Cold skin, shallow breath, unresponsive eyes. They were mourned, dressed, and entombed, sometimes within hours. Then came the knocking, desperate hands clawing at coffin lids. Some were heard, most were not. These incidents became so frequent that safety coffins were invented. Devices were built with strings tied to the corpse's fingers, connected to bells above ground, just in case. A ringing bell in the middle of the night, echoing through a silent graveyard, wasn't just chilling. It was a signal that someone below was still alive. The phrase, "saved by the bell," wasn't just a saying, it was a lifeline. Graves were sometimes reopened to find scratch marks on the lid, fingers bloodied, mouths frozen in final screams. These people didn't die of disease. They died of terror, suffocating alone in a box 6 feet under. The cemetery knock is more than a horror story. It's a reminder of how thin the line once was between death and life, how fear lived not in ghosts, but in the soil itself, and how even now, that quiet thud beneath the earth still echoes, begging us to listen, to never bury the living again. Elevator game. The elevator game is a ritual whispered through forums and urban legend threads, a supposed doorway to another world. The rules are specific. Enter a building with at least 10 floors, ride the elevator alone, pressing buttons in a precise sequence. If done correctly, a woman may enter on the 5th floor. She will not speak. You must not look at her. You must not answer her. If you do, you may never return. It sounds like pure fiction until you hear about Elisa Lam. In 2013, Elisa, a 21-year-old student, was found dead in the water tank of Los Angeles' Cecil Hotel, a place already soaked in decades of dark history. Her body was naked, her clothes floating nearby, no signs of trauma. The tank was sealed, accessible only by a locked rooftop hatch. Days before her discovery, hotel guests complained of strange water, foul-tasting, discolored. But what truly etched this case into public horror was the elevator footage. Captured shortly before her death, Elisa is seen acting erratically inside the hotel elevator, pressing multiple buttons in a bizarre order. She steps in and out, hides, peers into the hallway as if something unseen is following her. Then she appears to talk to someone, or something, just outside the doors, but no one is there. The elevator behaves strangely too, remaining open longer than it should, almost frozen. Was she playing the game? Her death was ruled accidental, but no theory, mental illness, foul play, drugs can fully explain the haunting behavior or how she ended up where she did. The elevator game promises another world. Elisa's story suggests that maybe, just maybe, she found it and couldn't come back. Slender Man? Slender Man was never meant to be real. He was born on an internet forum in 2009, a faceless, impossibly tall figure in a black suit with limbs like ropes and a presence that fed on fear. He wasn't tied to any folklore or history. He was a digital ghost story, stitched together with photoshopped images and chilling backstories. But something happened. People started to believe, and then it got bloody. In 2014, in Waukesha, Wisconsin, two 12-year-old girls lured their friend into the woods. They pinned her down and stabbed her 19 times. The motive? They claimed Slender Man told them to. They believed he lived in a nearby mansion. They believed hurting their friend would grant them his favor. When police asked them why, they spoke in deadpan voices, describing a loyalty to something they had never touched, but felt was watching, always. The victim miraculously survived, crawling to a path where a cyclist found her, her body nearly drained. The girls were arrested and diagnosed with shared delusions. But what haunted everyone wasn't just the act, it was the devotion, how fiction metastasized into obsession, how a made-up monster slipped between imagination and belief and became real in the hands of children. Slender Man didn't crawl from the woods. He crawled from our screens, through the cracks of a generation raised online. He became the first myth born in pixels, and yet fueled by something ancient, the need to fear, to believe, and to surrender to stories so deeply they can rewrite what's real, and in this case, what's unforgivable. Killer upstairs. The sounds were subtle at first, footsteps above the ceiling, faint at night, easy to dismiss. Maybe it was the house settling, maybe mice, maybe pipes. That's what the family told themselves. But the noises kept returning, louder, closer. One day, a homeowner in Pennsylvania grew suspicious after food started disappearing from the kitchen and odd items were moved. When he checked the attic, he found a sleeping bag, empty food wrappers, and a man quietly living inches above his family. This isn't folklore. In 2008, a Japanese woman was discovered living in a man's closet, undetected for months. In Seattle, a man returned from vacation to find someone had been squatting in his attic, using his things, sleeping in his bed. But the most terrifying cases are when the intruder isn't just squatting, they're waiting. There are stories where the killer isn't breaking in, they're already there. In Denver, a woman was found living inside a crawl space above a family's bedroom. She had been watching them through vents. In other cases, murderers have hidden in attics for days, descending only at night to stalk or kill. The horror isn't in the act, it's in the delay, the not knowing, the idea that while you showered, dressed, laughed, and lived, someone watched silently, just inches away, that your walls protected not just you, but something unspeakable, that your home, a place meant for safety, hid a predator above your head, breathing your air. The killer upstairs isn't fiction. It's a whisper above the ceiling, a shadow behind the vents, and it's already inside. Baby Train, in a quiet town where nothing much happened, something extraordinary began to emerge. A baby boom, not a slight uptick, but a tidal wave of new births so consistent and baffling that rumors swirled. The town had no unusual fertility programs, no romantic spa retreats, but it did have one thing, a freight train that rumbled through every morning at precisely 5 a.m., blaring its horn loud enough to rattle windows and stir dreams. Couples jolted awake by the thunder of steel on rails found themselves too tired to go back to sleep, but not too tired for intimacy. Over time, the town's birth records revealed a pattern so bizarre, it seemed like satire, an overwhelming concentration of babies born 9 months after winter. Journalists dismissed it as a joke, an urban myth passed around like gossip, but in places like Ilmington, UK, and even parts of Indiana, similar trends were noted. They weren't coordinated, they were conditioned. What makes the baby train so eerie isn't just the comedy, it's the quiet, involuntary manipulation. A whole generation born not from planned decisions or fate, but from the consequence of noise and timing. It suggests that even the most intimate choices, creating life, might be nudged by something as mundane as machinery. And in that truth lies something strangely unsettling, that the magic of conception, the sacred bond of new life, could be triggered not by candlelight or passion, but by a blaring horn and a restless dawn. It's not the legend that haunts you. It's the possibility that your very existence may have begun with a train. Snake in the toilet. You stumble into the bathroom in the dead of night, half awake, your feet cold against the tile. The fluorescent light hums above as you lower yourself onto the toilet. Then pain, searing, impossible pain. You leap up screaming, blood, fangs, a snake, coiled deep in the shadows of the bowl, hissing and alive. It sounds like a nightmare conjured to keep children from playing tricks, but it's happened more than once. Across the world, stories have surfaced of people bitten by venomous snakes hiding in their toilet bowls. In Thailand, a python sank its teeth into a man's genitals, requiring dozens of stitches. In Texas, a woman found a rattlesnake curled under the rim. In South Africa, a cobra struck a tourist mid-relief, sending venom through his bloodstream. He nearly died. Snakes enter through broken pipes, sewer systems, or open drains. Drawn by warmth, moisture, and sometimes rats, they wind their way up the plumbing into homes, into your home, and the toilet, cold porcelain and darkened, becomes the perfect hiding place. Quiet, close, hidden in the most vulnerable space imaginable. What makes this so disturbing isn't just the bite, it's the violation, the idea that a place meant for private relief could become a stage for sudden intimate violence. It hits a primal fear that danger can come from below when you're most exposed, most unguarded. We like to believe our homes are sanctuaries, but when something cold and scaled waits in silence beneath you, that illusion shatters with a hiss and a scream you'll never forget. Black-eyed children, they knock when the night is deep and still, 2 or 3 of them, small and quiet. Children, maybe 10, maybe 13, standing at your door with pale skin and oversized hoodies, asking to be let in. Their voices are flat, rehearsed. Can we use your phone? We need a ride. Let us in. but something's wrong. You can't look away from their eyes. Pitch black, no whites, no irises, just endless void. The legend of the black-eyed children first surfaced in the late 1990s when journalist Brian Bethel described a chilling encounter in Texas. Two boys approached his car at night, knocking on the window with strange politeness and an unsettling calm. He felt a primal terror without knowing why until he saw their eyes. Since then, the stories have spread like infection. People report the same pattern. These children appear at homes, cars, remote cabins. They ask to be let in. They never force themselves. They wait. And those who let them in, well, some say they suffer sickness, nightmares, or vanish entirely. What grips the heart isn't just the supernatural. It's the inversion of innocence. Children are supposed to be safe, soft, fragile, but these ones feel wrong in your bones. You feel it before you understand it. Their smiles don't reach their cheeks. Their words are memorized. They have no past, no warmth, just that eerie stillness, and those eyes, like deep water hiding something with teeth. Whether hoax, hallucination, or something darker, one thing is always the same. They knock and they ask, but they never beg, because they don't need to. They know curiosity kills quicker than cruelty. Murder Castle. In the heart of Chicago, during the 1893 World's Fair, stood a hotel unlike any other. Its halls winding like a maze, doors opening to brick walls, staircases leading nowhere, and rooms equipped with gas lines, soundproofing, and peepholes. Visitors came from all over the world, dazzled by the excitement of the fair. Many checked in. Some were never seen again. This was no ordinary hotel. It was H.H. Holmes's Murder Castle, and he was no ordinary man. Holmes, charming and well-dressed, posed as a respectable pharmacist and businessman, but beneath that polished exterior was a predator with an unmatched hunger. He designed the hotel himself, changing contractors frequently so no one understood the full layout. Each hallway, each room, was part of a larger design, one built for death. Women were his favorite prey. He lured them with promises of jobs, love, or lodging. They stepped inside willingly, unaware they had already entered a labyrinth of horror. Some rooms were airtight chambers where gas seeped in silently. Others had trapdoors that led to soundproof basements filled with surgical tables, furnaces, and vats of acid. He didn't just kill, he experimented, dismembered, and dissolved. Bodies disappeared as quickly as the screams. Holmes admitted to 27 murders, though estimates rise into the hundreds. What unsettles the soul isn't just the scale, but the precision, the planning, the way a man could build a castle out of human agony, brick by brick, behind polite smiles and polished shoes. It wasn't haunted walls that killed them, it was architecture, cold, calculated, deadly, a blueprint for hell. Phantom Hitchhiker. It's always late. The road is long, the night endless. Headlights cut through mist as you drive past barren trees and the occasional flicker of taillights far ahead. Then you see them, someone standing at the roadside, alone, thumb outstretched, a young woman in a pale dress, a man with tired eyes and old clothes. They look harmless, lost, cold. You stop. They get in. They're quiet, sometimes grateful, sometimes eerily silent. You glance at them in the mirror. They seem distant. You ask where they're going. Just a little farther, they say. And then, nothing. They're gone. You pull over. The seat is empty. No door open. No sound. Just an echo in your mind that they were ever there. This story has played out in town after town, country after country. In Chicago, Resurrection Mary is said to hitch rides near Resurrection Cemetery, only to vanish as the car passes the gates. In Cape Town, a woman in white appears on the N2 highway, drenched in fog, only to disappear mid-sentence. Some drivers report their car doors opening and closing on their own. Others hear voices, whispers, pleas. What chills the soul is that these aren't just tales told around campfires, police logs, eyewitnesses, newspaper clippings. The stories repeat almost identically, different names, same fear. Phantom hitchhikers aren't malevolent. They don't attack, they don't scream, they simply vanish. But what they leave behind is worse than violence. It's doubt, a haunting presence you invited in, a passenger who never really left, and a road that suddenly feels far longer than it did before. Polybius. In the early 1980s, a mysterious arcade cabinet appeared in Portland, Oregon. Black, sleek, unbranded. The game had no instructions, just a name, Polybius. Teenagers lined up to play it. The gameplay was mesmerizing, fast, geometric, hypnotic. But after a few minutes, strange things began to happen. Nausea, nightmares, amnesia, rage. Players reported seizures, hallucinations, even suicidal thoughts. Some swore they heard whispers long after they stopped playing. And then, just as quickly as it arrived, the machine vanished. The legend says men in black suits came regularly to collect data from the game. They didn't take money. They took notes, observations. No one knew where the machine had come from or who had made it. Some claimed it was a government experiment in mind control, a digital syringe injecting psychological chaos directly into the brains of youth. And then real history caught up with the myth. During the same time in Portland, authorities had placed arcade machines under surveillance to track illegal gambling and drug activity. Some cabinets were even tampered with by the FBI. And yes, there were actual reports of gamers getting sick. On November 27, 1981, 2 players collapsed in arcades, one from a migraine, the other from a seizure after playing Tempest. Another fell ill after a marathon gaming session. The myth of Polybius was born in that chaos, fear wrapped around a flickering screen. What makes Polybius so disturbing is its plausible fiction, a machine that rewires your mind, that watches you as much as you watch it, that makes you question if your thoughts are even your own. It wasn't just a game, it was a ghost in a cabinet, feeding on memory, flickering in the dark. The Boogeyman. The Boogeyman has always lived in the edges of our childhood, under the bed, behind the closet door, in the whispering dark where our breath turns shallow and our cries go unanswered. Parents used him as a warning. Stay good or he'll come for you. Stay quiet or he'll hear. But what if the Boogeyman wasn't just a shadow or a story? What if he had a name? Albert Fish was that name. In the 1920s, Fish roamed the streets of New York, an elderly man with a soft voice and kind eyes who smiled at children and spoke to their parents like a grandfather. He blended into the world with terrifying ease, but behind that gentle exterior lived a predator unlike anything the world had seen. He tortured, he mutilated, he killed, and he wrote about it, letters dripping with cruelty sent to the families of his victims, describing every sick detail with chilling calm. His most infamous letter was addressed to the mother of Grace Budd, a little girl he lured from her home with the promise of a party. She never returned. Years later, Fish sent a letter explaining how he cooked her, how he devoured her flesh over days, how she screamed. The Boogeyman didn't live in the dark. He walked in daylight. He laughed with neighbors. He used kindness as a weapon and wore trust like a disguise. He didn't need magic to haunt children. Only opportunity. Only access. Albert Fish was no myth. He was real. And he reminded us that the monsters we fear as children don't hide under our beds. They knock on the door and they smile. Satanic Panic. In the 1980s, a shadow crept across suburban America, not from the occult, but from inside living rooms and courtrooms. Whispers of underground cults, ritual abuse, and devil worship began to spread like wildfire. Parents clutched their children tighter. Daycare centers were accused. Teachers were handcuffed. The media, pulsing with hysteria, fed the frenzy with each new headline. Children describe human sacrifice, Satan in the classroom, preschool of the damned. It was called the Satanic Panic. And it was very real. The most infamous case centered around the McMartin preschool in California. Children were interviewed repeatedly, often coached into describing unimaginable horrors, underground tunnels, blood rituals, even flying witches. The trials lasted for years. Families were destroyed, reputations shattered, but no physical evidence was ever found. And yet, behind the hysteria, there were truths too dark to ignore. Elsewhere, real cases of abuse occurred, hidden beneath layers of silence. Some used the cloak of satanic imagery to terrify and control. In isolated instances, children were manipulated into silence by predators who invoked symbols of fear. The myth became a shield for monsters who didn't need rituals, just power and darkness. The real terror of the Satanic Panic wasn't in the horns or pentagrams. It was in how easily fear could twist justice, how quickly people became villains with no proof, and how children, meant to be protected, were used as weapons in an adult war of hysteria. The devil didn't infiltrate America through ritual. He walked in through mass paranoia, and no one stopped him. Room 428 at Ohio University's Wilson Hall is locked, not because it's damaged or under renovation, but because no one is allowed to sleep there anymore. The school sealed it permanently after decades of terrifying, unexplained events that left even the most skeptical minds shaken. It's the only dorm room on campus that has been officially deemed uninhabitable, not by design, but by fear. Students who stayed there reported furniture moving on its own. Chairs would scrape across the floor in the dead of night. Posters ripped themselves from the walls. Objects flew without warning. The television turned on and off without power. But it wasn't just the room. People reported a heavy, watching presence. Dreams turned violent. Some students woke up to find themselves pinned down by invisible hands. Others heard voices, some pleading, others angry. A few claimed to see the face of a man watching from the window, even when the room was 10 stories above the ground. One student jumped from that very window, whispering about the man in the corner. The university never publicly confirmed a link, but they sealed the door, bolted it, and moved on. Wilson Hall itself sits at the intersection of ancient Native American burial grounds. The university library holds records of occult activity in the area during the 1970s. Some say rituals were performed, something was awakened, something stayed. Room 428 isn't just a haunted dorm. It's a place where rules bend, where logic surrenders, where sleep becomes dangerous, and where, even behind a locked door, something waits, quiet, still, and watching. Body in the chimney, it starts with a smell, faint at first, like rotting meat or wet decay. It grows stronger, sour, thick enough to make the air feel heavy. Flies begin to gather. Strange stains seep through the fireplace, bricks. And then, the horror is discovered. A body, jammed deep inside the chimney, twisted, bloated, decomposing. This isn't an urban legend. It's real. It has happened more times than anyone wants to admit. In 2008, a 24-year-old man named Joshua Maddox vanished in Woodland Park, Colorado. For 7 years, his family searched. No clues, no trail. Then, during the demolition of an abandoned cabin just blocks from his home, workers made a chilling discovery. His body wedged inside the chimney. No shoes, his knees pressed to his chest, his hands curled inward as if frozen mid-struggle. Authorities ruled it accidental, that he had tried to enter from the roof, slipped in, and got stuck. But many disagreed. The furniture in the cabin had been mysteriously moved. The chimney was too narrow. The body showed no signs of a fall, and there was no logical reason why anyone would climb down a chimney of an abandoned house. Even more disturbing, this is not an isolated case. Across the U.S., people have been found dead inside chimneys, burglars, lost teens, even the mentally ill seeking shelter. But what truly haunts is the idea that someone could die inches from a hearth once meant to warm them, their final screams muffled by brick and ash. The chimney is supposed to be a symbol of safety, of home, of stories by the fire, but for some, it becomes a coffin, sealed in soot, where no one can hear you die. Secret room, it began with a chill, a draft, subtle but insistent, that seeped through the walls of a small New York apartment. The tenant, a young woman, couldn't figure it out. The windows were sealed, the vents closed, but the air felt wrong, colder near the mirror in the bathroom, almost as if something behind it breathed. Driven by unease, she removed the mirror, and behind it discovered a gaping hole in the wall. Not mold, not decay, a void. She shined a flashlight inside. What she found wasn't just insulation or pipes. It was a room, a secret room, dust-covered, half-furnished, and disturbingly lived in. A plastic bag lay in the corner, a water bottle, bedding on the floor. Someone had been there, maybe still was. She filmed everything, her breathing quick, her voice trembling, as she crawled through the hole, finding herself inside a second apartment, hidden within the walls of her own. No one had told her. The landlord claimed ignorance. There were no records, no reason it should exist, and yet it did. The room felt wrong, not just forgotten, but watched. It's the kind of discovery that fractures your sense of reality, that something could live beside you, just inches away without you ever knowing, that someone could see you through the mirror while you brushed your teeth, while you slept. She moved out. Who wouldn't? But the real horror is this. How many walls hide secrets? How many homes have hollow hearts, beating silently behind drywall? And how many people are living with ghosts they mistake for air? Char Man. They say if you drive the winding road through Ojai, California, late at night, you might hear rustling in the trees, maybe catch the scent of burning flesh. And if you're unlucky enough to stop your car near the old bridge on Creek Road, he'll appear, his skin blackened and peeling, his body limping from the pain that never ends. He is the Char Man, and the story, buried in smoke and screams, is far more than just a ghost tale. The legend speaks of a man horribly burned in a house fire. Some say it was a cabin, others a farmhouse. When rescuers arrived, they found the structure in ashes and the man barely alive. His skin was gone, his eyes wild. Something in him had snapped. They say he vanished into the forest, feral and shrieking, never to be seen again, except by those who get too close. But the legend echoes real tragedies. California's fire-ravaged history is littered with victims who didn't die, but lost everything, especially their minds. There have been reports even recently of disfigured men emerging from wildfire zones, screaming in confusion, charred but living. One firefighter recalled a figure crawling from the smoke, wailing like an animal. He wasn't dead, he said, but I think he wished he was. The Char Man isn't just about burns. He's about what's left when the fire doesn't kill you, but takes everything else. Your face, your family, your sanity. He isn't chasing you because he's evil. He's chasing you because he's still on fire, and no one will help. Mothman. He first appeared on a cold November night in 1966, an enormous figure with glowing red eyes and massive wings, spotted by two young couples driving near the TNT area of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. The creature didn't walk. It glided, chased their car at speeds over 100 mph, and vanished into the darkness. In the following weeks, more than 100 witnesses would report the same thing: a humanoid figure with wings like a bat, eyes that burned red, and a presence that made their blood run cold. But the sightings weren't just spooky tales. They were followed by something worse. In December 1967, the Silver Bridge connecting Point Pleasant to Ohio collapsed during rush hour, killing 46 people. The Mothman was never seen in the area again. Locals couldn't shake the feeling. The creature hadn't been a monster. It had been a warning. That's where the fear lies, not in the wings or the eyes, but in what came next. Witnesses described more than just sightings. They felt dread. Radios cut out. Dogs went missing. People suffered migraines and strange dreams. and then tragedy. Since then, Mothman has reportedly been seen before other disasters, near Chernobyl, the Twin Towers, and even Fukushima. Some believe he is a harbinger, a silent omen of catastrophe. Others think he is the disaster. What unnerves people isn't just the creature itself, it's the silence around it, the sense that something out there watches, moments before horror strikes, that fate might have a face, and that sometimes it looks straight at you, with burning eyes, just before everything falls. Killer nurse hospitals are supposed to be sanctuaries, places of healing, of quiet reassurance under fluorescent lights, but in the sterile stillness of patient rooms and hushed midnight corridors, death can come not as a mistake, but as a choice, and sometimes the hand that delivers it wears scrubs and a gentle smile. Janine Jones was a pediatric nurse in Texas during the 1970s and early 80s. Children under her care would deteriorate suddenly, unexpected cardiac arrests, seizures, gasping for breath when moments earlier they had been stable. She was always there, always rushing in, always trying to save them. Parents called her devoted. Doctors admired her instincts, until too many babies died. Jones wasn't healing. She was creating emergencies, injecting infants with dangerous doses of drugs to induce crises only she could respond to. Her motive? To be seen as a hero, to play God, to cause the fire and hold the hose. One doctor grew suspicious. Investigations began, vials disappeared, records were altered, but the proof was murky. So, like so many institutions do when they fear scandal, the hospital let her go. With glowing references, she moved on, more children died. Eventually, she was convicted for killing one baby and injuring another, but authorities believe she may have killed as many as 60 infants. 60. What rips through the heart isn't just the death toll, it's the betrayal. A nurse is meant to be the guardian between life and death, but Janine Jones blurred that line, turned trust into a weapon, and used compassion as her camouflage. She didn't just take lives, she did it while holding tiny hands, while mothers slept in the next room, while the world assumed its children were safe. Face on the floor. It began with a stain, an odd, smudge patch on the concrete floor of a home in Belmez, Spain. At first, the homeowner thought little of it, but as the days passed, the stain changed. It shifted, it sharpened, and soon, what stared back wasn't just dirt or water damage. It was a human face, not a cartoonish mark or an illusion of shadows. A face, with eyes hollowed in grief, a mouth open in terror, and features so distinct it sent chills through the house. The family scrubbed it, they bleached it, they chiseled the floor. The face returned, then others joined it. Neighbors came, then crowds, scientists, skeptics, priests. The house became a shrine and a spectacle. Some dismissed it as paint or pareidolia, the mind creating patterns where there are none. But chemical analysis found no pigments, and the faces kept evolving, appearing in new places, vanishing and reappearing as if alive. Some bore expressions of agony, others looked mournful like memories trapped in cement. The house was built over a centuries-old graveyard, they discovered. Bones were unearthed beneath the very kitchen floor, but no one could explain why the images continued after exhumation, why they grew clearer, why they seemed to watch. What unsettles isn't just the mystery, it's the permanence, the defiance, that even when erased, grief leaves its mark, that sorrow seeps into the foundation, that perhaps some pain is so deep it imprints itself on the world around it, refusing to be forgotten, not in spirit, not in silence, not even in stone. Disappearing hotel room. A mother and daughter arrive in Paris, tired but happy, eager to rest after their long journey. The mother feels ill, and the daughter is sent out to fetch medicine. She returns hours later, but the room number no longer exists. The concierge denies ever seeing them. The registry shows no record. The mother is gone, vanished, as if she never existed. This is the tale of the disappearing hotel room, retold in books, whispered across generations, always dismissed as myth, but it's rooted in something disturbingly plausible. During the 1889 Exposition Universelle in Paris, disease was rampant. Cholera and plague threatened to unravel the city. When travelers fell ill, especially foreigners, they were sometimes quietly removed to prevent panic or diplomatic scandal. If they died, the rooms were cleaned, repainted, even refurnished overnight. No record, no paper trail, no witnesses. The loved ones who searched were dismissed as delusional or mistaken. And it wasn't just in Paris. In London, in Venice, in early 20th century port cities, similar reports emerged. People, especially women, vanished while traveling, always while alone, always with the same hollow response. They were never here. What grips the soul isn't just the horror of disappearance, it's the indifference, the idea that a life could be erased so completely, so effortlessly, and no one would believe you, that your voice could drown beneath bureaucracy and polite denial, that someone you love could die alone behind hotel doors while you're still carrying the key. It's not the room that disappears, it's the truth, and by the time you notice, it's already gone. Vampire of Sacramento. In the winter of 1977, Sacramento was gripped by a fear so primal it felt ancient. People began locking their doors, afraid of what might come in. Not a thief, not a killer, but something worse. Richard Chase didn't just murder. He drank blood. He ate organs. He believed his blood was turning to powder, and he needed others, anyone, to stay alive. He started small, animals. Then he broke into homes, killing with terrifying speed and savagery. One victim was a pregnant woman, another, a mother and her 2 children. In one of the most chilling discoveries, police found a baby's remains stuffed into a closet, mutilated and desecrated. Blood smeared the walls, cups filled with it, plates used for body parts. The smell of death wasn't enough to cover the madness left behind. Chase believed he was dying from poisoning by Nazi UFOs, that he needed to drink blood to survive. He would smear soap on his head to absorb radio waves. He entered homes simply by testing doors. If it was unlocked, I took it as an invitation, he said. And that's the terror, the randomness, the vulnerability. Anyone could have been next, anyone whose door wasn't locked. They called him the Vampire of Sacramento. But what he really was a reflection of untreated illness turned monstrous, a man who descended into a nightmare so deep that reality no longer mattered. He wasn't hunting the wicked, he wasn't avenging a wrong, he was chaos, wrapped in skin, with death on his breath and thirst in his veins, and he knocked. Sleep paralysis demons. You wake up, but you can't move. Your chest is heavy, so heavy it feels like something is pressing down on it, stealing your breath. You try to scream, but your mouth won't open. Your eyes dart across the room, searching for something, anything, but the shadows shift. There's something there, in the corner, watching, crawling, smiling. Sleep paralysis is a real and terrifying condition. It occurs in that liminal space between sleep and wakefulness, when your brain becomes conscious before your body does. Your limbs remain frozen, your voice silent, but your senses, they're alive. And what people report during these episodes isn't just unsettling, it's universally horrifying. Across cultures, sufferers describe eerily similar visions. A dark figure at the foot of the bed, a hag crouching on their chest, a man with no face who stares and leans in slowly. Some say it whispers, others say it screams. Some feel hands on their necks, others see red eyes glowing just inches from theirs. This isn't rare. Studies estimate that over 40% of people experience sleep paralysis at some point in their lives. And for those who do, the experience is unforgettable. Trauma without injury, terror without escape. What makes sleep paralysis demons so haunting is that they aren't just stories. They're felt, viscerally, personally, and every person who has met one describes it with the same breathless fear. It was real. I know it wasn't a dream. These demons don't need flesh to scare you. They live in the space between your heartbeat and your breath. They arrive when you're most vulnerable, and they leave you questioning what's real long after morning comes. Shadow people. You see them just beyond the edge of waking, their forms tall, human-shaped but hollow. No features, no light, just black silhouettes darker than the dark around them. They don't speak, they don't move, they watch. And the moment you shift your gaze, they're gone, as if they were never there. But they were. You felt them. For countless people across cultures and continents, the experience is the same. During sleep paralysis or moments of fear, shadow people appear. Some describe them as passive. Others say they inch closer with every blink. The most infamous is the Hat Man, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a fedora, standing in doorways and corners like a phantom from another dimension. No one knows why he visits, but everyone who sees him remembers. What chills the soul isn't just their appearance, but their consistency. These are not dreams born from unique minds. They're shared, repeated, unshakable. People across the globe, who've never met, who speak different languages, describe the same entities in the same way. Some even report physical symptoms, a crushing weight on the chest, whispers in the ears, the feeling of being seen by something that should not be able to see. Neurologists explain it as the brain misfiring during REM sleep, but that doesn't explain why so many people see the same figures, why children and adults describe identical shapes, why they remember the fear more vividly than any dream. Maybe they're hallucinations, maybe they're memories, or maybe, in the moments between sleep and waking, the veil thins, and something ancient looks back. The licked hand. She was home alone for the night, her parents out of town, the house quiet, save for the occasional creak. But she wasn't scared. Her loyal dog slept beside her bed, a comforting presence in the dark. When a soft scratching echoed from somewhere downstairs, she reached down and the dog licked her hand, just like always, safe, loved, protected. The sound came again, louder this time, a faint drip. She rose to investigate. In the bathroom, horror waited. Her dog was dead, strung up in the shower, throat slit, blood dripping slowly into the drain. And on the mirror, written in crimson, "Humans can lick too." It's one of the most unsettling stories ever told, and chillingly close to the truth. Across decades, there have been real cases of killers breaking into homes and hiding for hours, even days. Some crawl beneath beds, others lurk in closets. In 2014, a woman in South Carolina discovered a man living in her attic, sneaking down only at night. In another case, a murderer remained hidden under the bed of his victim, escaping only after the crime. What turns the stomach isn't just the violence, it's the trust, the way safety becomes illusion. She thought it was her dog licking her hand, an act of love, but it was the killer, waiting in the dark, toying with her. The licked hand forces us to face a terrible truth. Evil doesn't always strike with noise or fury. Sometimes it whispers, pretends, waits, just close enough to touch. Highway of Tears. It stretches over 700 desolate kilometers through the forest and isolation of British Columbia, Canada. Highway 16, better known by the name it earned in sorrow, the Highway of Tears. Since the late 1960s, Indigenous women and girls have vanished or been found murdered along this stretch of road. They were daughters, mothers, sisters. They were hitchhiking to school, to work, to visit loved ones. And then they were gone. The terror is not just in the number, dozens officially, possibly hundreds unofficially. It's in the silence that followed. For decades, these disappearances were met with shrugs, blame, and dismissal. Authorities were slow to investigate. Media coverage was minimal. Families were left screaming into the void, clutching fading photographs and aching with unanswered questions. Some victims were found in ditches, some not at all. Their last moments remain unknown, buried in thick forest and thicker apathy. There have been killers, real ones, serial predators who use the highway as a hunting ground, but the deeper horror is systemic. These women weren't just taken, they were forgotten because of their skin, their poverty, their distance from power. The land swallowed them, yes, but so did a society that failed to notice they were ever missing. To drive that road now is to pass through haunted ground, every mile a wound, every signpost a whisper. It's a place where evil didn't wear a mask, it wore indifference, where the monsters weren't just those who killed, but those who looked away. And the road stretches on, quiet, cold, waiting. Ghost ship SS Ourang Medan. The SOS was garbled, but clear enough to chill the blood of any sailor. All officers, including the captain, are dead, lying in chartroom and bridge, possibly whole crew dead. Minutes later, I die. Then, silence. In 1947, distress signals were picked up from the SS Ourang Medan, a Dutch freighter adrift somewhere in the Strait of Malacca. A nearby American vessel, the Silver Star, responded. When they boarded the silent ship, what they found was straight out of a nightmare. The entire crew was dead. Their bodies were sprawled across the decks and corridors, mouths wide open in frozen screams, eyes staring skyward as if death had caught them mid-terror. Some looked like they had been reaching for something invisible. There were no wounds, no blood, no signs of a fight, just contorted corpses and an unnatural stillness. Even the ship's dog was found dead, teeth bared, as if it had seen something so horrific it died from fear alone. The air felt wrong, heavy, electric. The crew of the Silver Star decided to tow the Ourang Medan to port. But just as they secured the tow lines, smoke began rising from the hold. Moments later, the ship exploded violently and sank into the depths, taking its secrets with it. To this day, no official records of the Ourang Medan exist. No nation ever claimed it. Theories range from chemical leaks to supernatural curses. But what haunts the imagination is the raw, inescapable fear frozen on every face. Something killed that crew, not with weapons, but with terror. And whatever it was, it left behind a silence loud enough to echo across the sea forever. Killer on Craigslist. It started with an ad, just a few lines of text offering work on a remote Ohio farm. Free room, board, and decent pay. It sounded like salvation to struggling men looking for a second chance. All they had to do was answer, show up, and trust. Several did. They packed their bags, left behind their lives, and followed digital breadcrumbs to a stranger's land. What they found instead was a shallow grave already waiting. In 2011, police uncovered the terrifying truth. The ad was a trap. A man named Richard Beasley, posing as a kind employer, was luring victims to a fake job, then shooting them, robbing them, and burying them in the woods like trash. One man survived. He'd felt something off as soon as he arrived. He noticed the silence, the way Beasley's partner stood too close. When the gun came out, he ran, wounded, bleeding, but alive. And because of him, the bodies were found. The truth dragged into daylight. But the horror lingers, because Craigslist isn't a back alley. It's not a shadowy bar or a known trap. It's your phone, your home, your hope, and the idea that help or work or love might be one click away makes it all the more poisonous when that click becomes a death sentence. This wasn't just murder. It was a betrayal of trust in the most modern form, a killer who hid behind a keyboard, a weapon wrapped in kindness, and a reminder that in a world where strangers meet online every second, monsters adapt. Haunted mirror. It looked like any other antique, ornate, dusty, elegant with age. A beautiful addition to the room, inherited from a distant relative or found in a forgotten shop corner. But the longer it stayed, the more the house changed. Shadows lingered longer. Cold spots bloomed in corners, and then came the reflections, slightly delayed, slightly off. People caught glimpses of themselves smiling when they weren't, moving when they hadn't, standing still, but blinking out of sync. Stories of haunted mirrors stretch back centuries, and some are rooted in verifiable terror. In the Myrtles plantation, one such mirror is said to hold the trapped souls of a murdered mother and her children. After their deaths, no one covered the glass. Handprints continue to appear on its surface, no matter how often it's cleaned. In other cases, families have reported being watched from the glass, eyes in the background that don't belong to anyone living. What makes haunted mirrors so profoundly disturbing is their intimacy. You stare into them every day. They show you yourself, your face, your secrets. And when that reflection turns foreign, twisted, aware, what do? You can't just look away. It might be watching even when you don't. Mirrors have long been seen as portals, not just objects. Many cultures believed they could trap spirits or reflect the soul. To stare too long into one is to flirt with something ancient, something waiting. It's not the mirror that's haunted. It's what's on the other side, waiting, smiling, and maybe wanting out. Ghost Boy of Clinton Road. Deep within the Pine Barrens of West Milford, New Jersey, lies Clinton Road, a narrow, winding path shrouded in fog and legend. It's a place where headlights seem to dim, radios go silent, and the trees close in like they're listening. But the most enduring and disturbing story is of the ghost boy beneath the bridge. They say if you stop on the bridge at midnight and toss a coin into the water, the boy will return it. Not later, not mysteriously, right away. The splash of the coin is followed by silence, and then a faint clink on the pavement behind you. He's repaying a debt, even in death. The legend begins with tragedy. A young boy decades ago either pushed or slipped into the water. Some say he was fleeing from something. Others say he was lured. His body was never recovered. Only rumors and a name lost to time. But witnesses began to report strange happenings. Cold hands brushing ankles, coins placed neatly on car hoods, faint sobbing with no one in sight. Real police logs confirmed dozens of bizarre 911 calls from that stretch of road, some citing shadowy figures, others reporting being touched by something unseen. Paranormal investigators recorded temperature drops and electromagnetic surges near the bridge, and the coins keep appearing. But the Ghost Boy story doesn't end in fear. It ends in longing, in a child who still watches over a cursed stretch of road, returning what little he was given, a coin, a moment, a satatano, or a second chance, forever lost, forever haunting, room full of dolls. You open a door, expecting dust, maybe forgotten furniture. Instead, you're met with silence and 1,000 eyes staring back, glassy, lifeless, waiting. The room is filled with dolls, on shelves, in chairs, hanging from the ceiling, their faces cracked, their clothes yellowed, their smiles fixed in something that doesn't feel like joy. It feels like they've been waiting, watching, remembering. This isn't fiction. In 2013, Russian authorities entered the home of Anatoly Moskvin, a quiet, scholarly man known for his love of history and cemeteries. Inside his cluttered apartment, they discovered what looked at first like a collection of vintage dolls, dozens of them. But something was wrong. Their clothes seemed handmade. Their hands looked too real. The smell was faint, but unmistakable. They weren't dolls. They were the mummified remains of dead girls, exhumed from local cemeteries and preserved by Moskvin himself. He had carefully dug up their bodies, dried them, wrapped their limbs in fabric, and dressed them like dolls, some with music boxes sewn inside so they could speak. He claimed he talked to them, watched cartoons with them, celebrated birthdays. He believed they were still alive in some way, that he was saving them. What's horrifying isn't just the desecration, it's the intimacy, the tenderness, the slow, careful attention he gave to every stitch, every button, every curl of hair. These weren't trophies, they were companions, and each one had once been a real child. A room full of dolls is unsettling, but a room full of children pretending to be dolls, that stays with you long after you close the door. Cannibal family. In the bleak folklore of Scotland, the story of Sawney Bean and his clan sits like a rotting wound, festering with horror, whispered with unease. The legend says Alexander Sawney Bean fled into the coastal caves with his wife in the 16th century. There, beneath the crashing waves and jagged cliffs, they raised a family, not with love or warmth, but with blood. Generations grew in that darkness, bred in incest and raised on flesh. They would attack travelers along the road, dragging them back into the cave like prey. Limbs were hacked off, bodies dismembered. What couldn't be eaten immediately was preserved in jars, hanging from the cavern walls like butcher's stock. For 25 years, hundreds vanished, whole families disappeared without a trace. The authorities were baffled, locals turned on each other, suspicion festered like disease. When the truth finally surfaced, it was by accident. A group of soldiers stumbled across the den after a failed attack. What they found didn't feel real. Piles of bones, decaying torsos, pickled heads, children born with no names, no shame, feeding on the corpses of strangers as if it were bread. The story is old, yes, and some claim it's myth, but records from the time describe an execution so public and so brutal it begs for belief. Limbs torn off with hot pincers, burned alive for their crimes. It wasn't just punishment, it was revenge, because what the Bean family consumed wasn't just flesh, it was safety, it was peace, and when that's taken by something that looks human but isn't anymore, you don't just bury it, you make sure it burns. House that bleeds. It started with a sticky red trail oozing from the baseboards. The walls began to seep, slow and thick, like tears of something ancient and wounded. The scent was unmistakable, metallic, raw, alive. In 1987, in a quiet Atlanta home, Minnie and William Winston discovered what would haunt them forever. Their house was bleeding, not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. When they called the police, officers were skeptical until they saw it themselves. A dark, viscous substance leaked from the walls and floorboards. It stained the bathroom tiles. It trickled across the kitchen. Samples were taken and sent to labs. The result? Human blood, type O. Neither of the Winstons had that blood type. No injuries, no bodies, no intruders, just blood, thick and cold, and coming from inside their home. The case remains unexplained. Investigators found no evidence of a hoax, no signs of foul play, and yet the blood kept coming. Journalists covered it. Neighbors whispered. The house, once ordinary, became something else, a wound that bled without reason. What terrifies most isn't the sight, it's the violation. Homes are meant to shelter, to soothe, but this one wept like it remembered something horrific. The bleeding house challenges the rules of the natural world. It says, suffering leaves stains. Even when you can't see them, they're there. Some houses remember everything, every scream, every silence, every sin soaked into the walls. And sometimes, when the memory is too much to bear, the house bleeds, because it cannot forget, and now neither can you. Haunted Bunk Bed. In the small town of Horicon, Wisconsin, the Tallman family thought they were just buying a second-hand bunk bed for their children. Ordinary, affordable, harmless, but what followed was a storm of terror that tore through their home like a cold wind that never left. From the moment the bed entered their house, everything changed. Doors slammed shut without warning. Radios flickered to life with guttural voices that spoke in tongues. Their children screamed of shadowy figures, watching them as they slept. One daughter claimed a red-eyed witch stood at the foot of her bed night after night. The youngest said a voice told him he would die in that room. The parents, desperate and exhausted, witnessed it too, a figure moving through the hall, flames bursting in the garage with no source, a suffocating presence that made sleep feel like drowning. The events became so intense, the family called their pastor, and even he couldn't stay inside for long. He left shaken, pale, silent. Police were brought in, not to investigate a crime, but to watch over the home as the family fled in terror. They burned the bed, not sold, not donated, burned because some things should not be passed on. This wasn't whispered folklore. This made headlines. The Tall Man Haunting, it was called. A case so disturbing, it inspired an episode of Unsolved Mysteries. What chills the blood isn't just the haunting, but the simplicity of it. A bed, a place meant for safety, for rest, for childhood dreams, turned into an altar for fear. Sometimes evil doesn't knock. It arrives wrapped in wood and waits. Axeman of New Orleans. In the suffocating summer of 1918, New Orleans trembled, not from storms or floods, but from something far more insidious. A man who broke into homes in the dead of night, wielding an axe, and left behind only blood, silence, and fear. The Axeman didn't steal. He didn't speak. He simply slipped through locked doors, often using the victim's own axe, murdered whoever was inside, and vanished. His victims were mostly grocers, families of Italian descent, people simply trying to survive in a city already thick with tension and poverty. He shattered the skulls of husbands, wives, children. Sometimes he killed both parents and left a baby crying in a blood-soaked crib. There was no pattern, no motive, just horror. Then came the letter. Sent to a local newspaper, it was signed, "The Axeman of New Orleans." He claimed to be a spirit, a demon from the hottest hell, and promised to spare any home where jazz was playing. That night, March 19th, 1919, the city exploded in music. Every home, every club, every bar played jazz until dawn. No one died that night, but he returned. He kept killing, and despite police efforts, he was never caught, never named, never seen, just blood and silence and jazz. What makes the Axeman so haunting isn't just the brutality, it's the elegance of his terror. He didn't just kill, he played with a city's psyche. He made them dance to stay alive. His presence was like a fever dream soaked in brass and dread, and his absence, even now, still feels like a breath held too long in a room that's just a little too quiet. Giggling Nanny, she looked like a grandmother from a postcard. Plump cheeks, soft curls, an apron dusted with flour. Nanny Doss was warm, always smiling, and never without a hearty laugh that made people feel safe. She baked pies, she told jokes, she flirted shamelessly, and beneath all that charm, she killed. Between 1920 and 1954, Nanny poisoned at least 11 people, though the number may be far higher. Her victims included her own husbands, children, sisters, mother, grandson, and mother-in-law. All died quietly, their illnesses seemingly natural. No one suspected the sweet woman by their side, spooning out soup and dabbing foreheads with cold cloths. She attended their funerals in pearls, sometimes cracking jokes through her tears, always giggling. They called her the giggling granny because of that laugh, an eerie, unbothered chuckle she carried even when confessing to murder. When asked why she did it, she smiled and said she was just looking for the perfect husband. When one disappointed her, she stirred arsenic into their coffee. She read romance magazines obsessively, dreaming of love while murdering anyone who didn't fit the fantasy. The horror lies in the contradiction. She didn't stalk in the dark or break into homes. She was home, the pillow tucked under your head, the kiss on your cheek, the laugh at the dinner table. She killed with sugar and silence, with kindness as her camouflage. Nanny Doss didn't wear a mask. She didn't need one. She taught the world that sometimes the devil comes not with claws or knives, but with a grin, a plate of pie, and a laugh you'll never forget. Phoenix Lights, March 13th, 1997. A warm Arizona night. Thousands of people, Pilots, police officers, families with children looked up and saw something that shouldn't have been there. Massive, silent, V-shaped, a string of glowing orbs, stretching wider than a football field, moving in eerie synchronicity across the sky. No sound, no explanation, just awe and fear. The Phoenix Lights became one of the most widely witnessed and most chilling UFO sightings in modern history. People pulled over on highways, pointing, crying, whispering prayers. Entire neighborhoods stood in their driveways, mouths agape. These weren't streaking meteors or blinking planes. They moved slowly, intentionally, as if watching, as if waiting. Some reported it hovered above them, so low they could see its underbelly. Others described a sensation of being watched from inside their own thoughts. The military gave conflicting answers. First, they claimed no operations were underway. Then they blamed flares. But the witnesses weren't drunk. They weren't imagining things. These were teachers, doctors, mothers, children, all describing the exact same thing: massive, structured, otherworldly. Arizona's governor at the time, Fife Symington, first mocked the incident, only to later admit he'd seen it too. It was undeniably something other than man-made, he said. What makes the Phoenix Lights so unforgettable is its quiet terror. No beams, no abductions, just a presence too large to ignore and too perfect to explain. The kind of sight that steals your breath and leaves a question mark in your soul. It didn't land, it didn't attack, it just came, and then it was gone, like it was never supposed to be seen, but it was. Livestock mutilations. Across the lonely plains of the American West, ranchers began waking to scenes that didn't belong in nature. Cattle found dead in their pastures, bloodless, untouched by predators, their eyes surgically removed, organs gone, tongues sliced with unnerving precision. No footprints, no struggle, no blood, just silence, just absence. At first, people blamed coyotes, or cults, or pranksters, but the wounds defied reason. These weren't ragged tears or messy bites. They were clean, deliberate, almost clinical. In Colorado, New Mexico, Oregon, dozens of cases, then hundreds. Federal agencies investigated. Reports were filed. Nothing explained it. One rancher, hardened by years on the land, broke down at the sight of his prize bull, its genitals removed, its body completely drained of blood, as if exsanguinated in a vacuum. And then came the lights. Farmers began reporting strange objects in the sky, silent discs hovering over fields, beams of light trailing over the earth like fingers. Some said they saw their animals levitate. Others claimed to find tripod-like impressions burned into the soil. The government denied everything. Official reports labeled it unexplained, and that's what haunts us. The refusal to believe your own eyes, the gaslighting of reality. Something is happening, something that leaves no sound, only scars, something that moves through our skies or our silence with surgical coldness. It isn't just about animals. It's about powerlessness, about waking up and realizing that something, somewhere, is cutting into our world, and we can't stop it. We don't even understand it. We just bury what's left and wait. Phantom limbs. You lose a limb and yet it's still there. You feel your fingers curl, your foot itches, your hand clenches in pain so unbearable it makes you scream. But there's nothing to see, nothing to touch, nothing to treat, just pain from a body part that no longer exists. Phantom limb syndrome is one of the most haunting medical phenomena known to science. After amputation, up to 80% of patients report vivid sensations in their missing limb, sometimes mild, sometimes agonizing. They feel heat, cold, cramps. Some say they feel their hand clench so tightly they beg doctors to cut it off again. One man even demanded his non-existent arm be amputated at the elbow because the ghost of his fingers felt like they were digging into his palm, drawing blood that wasn't there. The brain doesn't understand absence. It maps the body as if every part still exists. So when a limb is lost, the brain fires signals into a void, and the void screams back, but it doesn't stop with pain. Some claim their phantom limbs move against their will. Others say the limb feels like it's watching them, alien, detached, but still somehow them. There are accounts of war veterans waking in the night, trying to scratch a leg that was left on a battlefield decades ago. One woman felt her missing arm stroke her cheek as she cried. This isn't a haunting of the supernatural, it's a haunting of the self, a cruel echo of what once was. Your body remembers even when your flesh forgets, and when the memory turns into suffering, there is nowhere to run because the ghost lives inside your skin. Bridgewater Triangle. There's a stretch of land in southeastern Massachusetts where reality unravels. They call it the Bridgewater Triangle, a 200-square-mile vortex of unexplainable terror, where compasses spin, animals flee, and nothing feels quite right. It includes swamps that swallow sound, forests that echo with voices no one speaks, and skies that bleed strange lights. The Hockomock Swamp, its haunted heart, was once called the place where spirits dwell by Native Americans, and they were right. For centuries, it's been the site of chilling phenomena, phantom lights, glowing orbs, Bigfoot-like creatures with red eyes, and even winged beasts the size of cars. People have vanished without a trace. Others claim to have seen UFOs hovering silently above the trees, while police report ritualistic animal mutilations deep in the marsh. But it's not just the wilderness that's cursed. Near the swamp, strange murders, suicides, and cult activity have plagued the surrounding towns. Schools report outbreaks of mass hysteria. Children speak in tongues, and many who enter certain parts of the triangle, particularly at night, describe overwhelming dread, as if something unseen watches, waiting. Locals tell stories of ghostly Native American warriors seen marching silently through the mists, of spectral dogs with glowing eyes, of invisible hands reaching from the darkness to grab ankles and pull. Some leave the area broken, physically ill, unable to sleep for days. It isn't one story, it's all of them, stacked like bones beneath the soil. And if there's one thing that haunts the Bridgewater Triangle most, it's the feeling that whatever it is knows you're there, and it never forgets. Disappearing village in the frozen Canadian wilderness of 1930, a fur trapper named Joe LaBelle arrived at the small Inuit settlement of Ongikuni, expecting warmth, laughter, and shared meals. What he found instead was a ghost village, fires still smoldering, meals left half-eaten, dogs starved and frozen in chains, but no people, not a single soul. Every inhabitant had vanished. The huts were undisturbed, clothes were folded, rifles untouched, no signs of struggle, no tracks in the snow leading in or out. It was as if an entire village, men, women, children, had been lifted into the sky and erased. LaBelle ran to the nearest telegraph office to alert authorities. A search began, but nothing was ever found. Not one body, not one clue. Skeptics later questioned the story's validity, pointing to the lack of concrete evidence, but other records, including those from Canadian Mounties, suggest something did happen, something strange enough to defy explanation. Eyewitnesses in nearby regions even reported lights in the sky, a strange hum in the night, and an unnatural stillness that settled over the area. What chills the blood isn't just the vanishing, it's the silence left behind, a fire without people, dogs who howled until death, boots lying neatly beside empty beds, the kind of absence that feels intentional, surgical. Wrong? The disappearing village of Ongikuni isn't just a mystery, it's a scar on the map, a story whispered by the wind over abandoned snow. Something took them, no blood, no scream, just gone. And the snow, as always, covered every trace. Babysitter and the caller. She thought it was going to be a normal night, just her, the sleeping kids upstairs, and a few hours of television on the couch. The phone rang. She answered. Silence. Then breathing. Then the words that turned her veins to ice. "Have you checked the children?" She laughed it off at first. A prank call. Kids, probably. The phone rang again. Same question, same breath. Her smile faded. She called the police. They told her to keep him talking next time. When he did, they traced the call. Moments later, their voice cracked through the receiver. "The call is coming from inside the house." This is the story everyone tells at slumber parties. It's been passed down for decades, but it's not just an urban legend. It has roots in true horror. In 1950, a teenager named Jeanette Christman was babysitting when she was brutally murdered by an intruder. The killer cut the phone line, broke in, and attacked her while the child slept nearby, unharmed. The house had been locked. There was no sign of forced entry. Many believe the killer had been inside. The horror of this tale isn't just in the crime, it's in the timing, the illusion that safety exists in the walls of a familiar home, that we can protect others when the danger is already breathing the same air, that sometimes the monster doesn't have to break in, it's already upstairs, already listening, already waiting, and by the time you answer the phone, it's too late. Smiling corpse. The body was still, pale, cold, but its face was smiling, not a soft, peaceful smile, not the gentle stillness of rest. This was different. The lips curled unnaturally high, the cheeks stretched tight, the teeth bared in a grin that looked too wide, too deliberate, like the corpse had seen something right before death, something that twisted its final breath into a grotesque performance. In morgues across the world, embalmers and medical examiners have encountered the phenomenon. Corpses frozen with expressions of ecstasy, shock, or terror. The most chilling are those that smile. This is no poetic metaphor. It's real. Sometimes it's a result of rigor mortis, a final contraction of the facial muscles, but sometimes the smile appears long after death has set in, with no physical explanation. In one harrowing case, a woman who died peacefully was later found with her mouth pulled into a horrifying grin, hours after she had been declared dead. No one had touched her. The room had been locked, and yet her face had changed. Another man, found in the woods, was discovered with a smile so vivid that police believed he had been laughing when he died, but his body told a different story. Every bone in his hands was broken, as if he tried to claw at something or someone, and still he smiled. We expect the dead to rest, to be still, to be silent, but a smiling corpse feels alive in all the wrong ways, as if death itself whispered something into their ear, as if their last moment wasn't peace, but revelation, and whatever they saw made them grin. Bog bodies, they emerge from the earth like preserved screams, skin leathery, eyes shut forever, mouths twisted as if caught mid-breath. Bog bodies, as they're called, are the perfectly mummified remains of people pulled from the wetlands of northern Europe. They are not skeletons, they are faces, hands, wounds. They are thousands of years old, yet they look like they died just yesterday. Found in Ireland, Denmark, Germany, and beyond, these bodies are the result of peat bogs, cold, acidic, oxygen-starved swamps that halt decay and cradle death. But it's not how they died that disturbs the soul. It's why. Most weren't buried with care or ritual. They were slaughtered, throats slashed, skulls crushed. Some were stabbed multiple times, strangled with cords, then drowned, all in the same death. One man, the famous Tolan man, was found with his eyes closed, lips still curled in peace, a noose dug into his neck like a shadow. Another had nipples sliced off, likely as part of a ritual to strip him of identity and power before the final blow. These weren't accidents or warfare. They were sacrifices, bodies offered to gods or forces we no longer understand. People chosen, killed violently, and placed into the bog not to be honored, but to be forgotten. And yet, the bog didn't forget. It kept their pain, their fear, their final moments sealed in mud for centuries until the earth could hold its secrets no longer. Looking at a bog body isn't like viewing a corpse. It's like time reaching out, forcing you to see a death that still breathes, a face that never stops screaming. Dolls with human hair. At first glance, they are beautiful. Handcrafted faces, delicate glass eyes, tiny fingers painted with care. But then you notice the hair, glossy, tangled, too real. You touch it, it's soft, too soft, because it is real, human. And suddenly, the doll no longer feels like a toy. It feels like someone. In the Victorian era, it wasn't uncommon to use real human hair in doll making, often taken from deceased loved ones. It was seen as a way to memorialize the dead, keep them close, hold on to a piece of them forever. But some dolls crossed a line, not just mementos, but vessels, hair taken without consent, from orphanages, from hospitals, even graves. Museums today still house these relics. One such doll in the UK has hair that DNA tests revealed to belong to a child buried in the 1800s. In Japan, a doll named Okiku sits behind glass in a temple. Her black hair grows. It's trimmed. It grows again. Monks believe her spirit remains inside. There are stories of people who've bought antique dolls at estate sales only to hear whispers at night, doors left ajar, hair found on pillows. The dolls never seem to sit exactly where they were left. And always, that hair, silky, scented with old earth still growing. The horror lies in the intimacy. Hair is human, living. It carries memory, DNA, touch. And when stitched onto porcelain faces, it doesn't bring comfort. It brings a haunting presence, as if someone is still attached, still watching, still waiting to be remembered. Sewer alligator. New York City, 1935. A group of boys shoveling snow into a storm drain screamed as something black and writhing lunged up from the darkness. It was no rat, no snake. It was an alligator, 7 feet long, furious, and very real. Firemen were called. They pulled it from the icy filth and killed it on the spot. No zoo claimed it. No pet owner stepped forward. It had been living in the sewers. The legend of the sewer alligator has been dismissed for decades as tabloid fantasy. Tourists laugh, locals scoff, but truth has a way of lurking beneath the surface. There are documented accounts, not just in New York, but across the U.S., of baby alligators being flushed down toilets when they grew too large or aggressive. In warm climates like Florida, they sometimes survive. In cooler places, they adapt, living short, brutal lives in the steam-heated underbelly of cities. City workers have reported seeing movement in the tunnels, eyes reflecting light where no eyes should be, strange claw marks on wet concrete. In some cases, entire colonies of reptiles were discovered in drainage systems, feeding on rats and waste invisible to the world above. The horror isn't just the gator, it's what it represents, that beneath the hum of traffic and glowing windows lies another world, a kingdom of shadows and rot, and in that kingdom, nature adapts, it survives, it watches. The sewer alligator is real because we made it real. We discarded it, flushed it, forgot it, and it grew teeth in the dark, waiting, thriving, beneath our feet. House that screams. It didn't start with blood or shadows. It started with sound, a low moan through the walls, a breathy whisper behind closed doors, the kind of noise that makes your stomach tighten, not because it's loud, but because it shouldn't be there. In 1991, the Andrews family moved into a quiet brick home in upstate New York. Almost immediately, they heard things, shuffling footsteps above them, dragging noises in the walls, strange knocks echoing through the pipes. But no one was there. At first, they blamed the old house. Maybe it was settling, maybe it was rats, until the voices started, full conversations, laughter, a man singing lullabies in the vents. They called the police. Nothing was found. They even had the house searched professionally. Still, the noises continued, growing louder, closer, until one night, the daughter, Annie, came home and found her bedroom trashed. On the wall, in red lipstick, a message, "I'm back. Find me if you can." What they found was beyond reason. Hidden behind a dresser, in a crawl space no one knew existed, was Danny LaPlante, a local teen who had broken into their home weeks before. He'd been living inside their walls, crawling through secret spaces, watching them, taunting them. The house wasn't haunted, it was inhabited. And the screams, they weren't ghosts, they were him. What chills you isn't just what happened, it's what could have. The idea that someone could be living within your home, slipping behind your walls, whispering into your dreams, and you'd never know until the house screams. And this time, it screams back. Halloween Hangman. In the early morning hours of Halloween, a figure hung from a tree in a quiet Delaware town. It dangled eerily above the sidewalk, limp, pale, dressed in street clothes. Passers-by chuckled, mistaking it for decoration. It was, after all, the season of ghouls and ghosts, a fitting display. Some even posed for pictures. Others commented on how realistic it looked. No one questioned it for hours until someone finally looked close enough to see the truth. It wasn't a prop. It wasn't a prank. It was a woman, a real woman who had taken her own life, hanging herself in the night from a tree just steps from the road. She had been there since before sunrise, alone, suspended in silence, while the world walked beneath her and mistook her death for theater. When authorities arrived, the festive mood snapped like a bone. Yellow tape replaced laughter. Costumes were stained with shame, and the town stood in stunned disbelief, shattered by how easily tragedy had worn the mask of celebration. This story has happened more than once. It's not just a tale. In multiple cities and towns, real bodies have been mistaken for Halloween decor, hung from fences, slumped on porches, even left in yards. And each time, the horror isn't just in the death, it's in the blindness, the way we overlook suffering when it's framed by holiday lights, the way we stop seeing people as people when they look just enough like fiction. Because the scariest thing about the Halloween Hangman is how long we let her hang. Death radio station. It crackles through static in the dead of night, barely audible, yet eerily precise. A monotonous voice repeats a string of numbers, or tones, or fragmented words in a language no one understands. No music, no commercial breaks, just signals that seem to stretch across time and reason. These are the number stations, shortwave broadcasts, transmitting across the globe. No one knows exactly who sends them, but some believe they deliver orders, and sometimes omens. UVB 76, known as the Buzzer, is one of the most infamous. Broadcasting out of Russia since the 1970s, it transmits a constant buzzing tone, interrupted by strange voice messages, coded, urgent, cold. On occasion, the buzz stops. A voice whispers something, then silence. People who've tracked the signal say it moves, that it reacts, that sometimes it responds. And then people started dying. In Poland, a man was found with a shortwave receiver, dead with coordinates scrawled on his arm, coordinates linked to an old numbers frequency. In Germany, a listener was found in his apartment, his walls covered in station transcripts, his eyes burned shut. Coincidence, some say. Obsession. But what if these stations weren't just relics of Cold War espionage? What if they were doors, opened by frequency, heard only by those already marked? There is no official explanation. Governments deny involvement. The signals persist, always at the same time, always in the same cold voice. They say you shouldn't listen too long because what starts as static might start whispering your name. Haunted toys. They arrive as gifts, smiling dolls, stuffed bears, blinking robots. We place them in cribs and on shelves, never questioning their glassy stares or frozen grins. But sometimes the giggle you hear at night isn't from your child. Sometimes the toy moves when no one's in the room. Sometimes it talks when its batteries are long dead. In 2014, a mother in Texas reported her daughter's Elsa doll would laugh and speak in Spanish, even after being turned off. They threw it away. Days later, it reappeared in their home. Another family claimed a toy telephone began ringing every night at 3:00 a.m., despite no power. They buried it in a storage box and still heard it through the walls. Then there are the dolls. In Mexico, La Isla de las Muñecas, the island of the dolls, is a swampy graveyard of decaying plastic faces strung from trees by a man who claimed the dolls were alive. He died mysteriously in the very spot where he said the first spirit called to him. But the most chilling cases are the quiet ones: the doll that changes position, the bear that turns its head, the toy that knows your name. These aren't malfunctions. They're memories soaked into fabric, fury stitched between seams. Because toys don't forget, they absorb. The love, the pain, the screaming silence of a child gone too soon. A toy isn't just plastic and fluff. It's a vessel. And once it's been loved, once it's been held through fear, it can carry that fear forever, even after you let go. Spontaneous combustion. She was found in her favorite chair, reduced to ash. Her legs remained untouched, still wearing socks and slippers, but everything above the knees had been incinerated. The room was intact, the walls unscorched. A lamp beside her was untouched. The only sign of the inferno was her. No source of fire, no accelerants, just a pile of ash where a woman once sat, as if she had simply ignited. This is not fiction. This is what investigators discovered in 1951 when Mary Reeser was found burned to death in her St. Petersburg, Florida home. Her body was nearly completely destroyed, something that normally requires hours of intense heat in a crematorium. Yet the rest of the room was pristine. Her chair was blackened, the rug beneath her scorched, but nothing else made sense. And she's not alone. Cases of spontaneous human combustion have been reported across centuries, bodies consumed by fire without explanation, sometimes while loved ones were only steps away. The victims are often found with their limbs intact, their torsos completely gone, and no clear ignition point. The fire seems to start within them. Science scrambles to explain it. Some cite the wick effect, where body fat fuels a slow-burning fire like a candle, but that doesn't explain the sheer intensity or the pattern or the eerie consistency. Isolated victims, fast burns, untouched surroundings. What terrifies is the idea that your own body could betray you. That fire could come not from outside, but from within. That one breath, one twitch, one heartbeat could be the spark. And in that moment, nothing around you will burn, just you, and no one will ever truly know why. Man in the walls. It started with small things: missing food, lights left on, doors unlocked that had been bolted shut. The family thought they were just forgetful, maybe tired, maybe stressed, but then came the sounds, scraping behind the drywall, soft thumps above the ceiling, the feeling of being watched when no one was there. The dog would bark at empty corners. The child swore someone whispered her name at night, and always the smell, damp, rotting, human. They thought it was paranoia until they found him. Hidden behind a false wall in the attic was a makeshift nest, food wrappers, bedding, a bucket for waste. Someone had been living there, crawling through the crawl spaces, watching them through vents, breathing with them, sleeping inches above them. He knew their routines, their patterns, their children's names. In one case, the man had stolen clothes, dressed like the husband, and stood silently in the dark at night, just watching. This isn't a horror film. It's happened. In Colorado, Japan, Pennsylvania, real people have discovered strangers secretly living in their walls, attics, basements. Some had been there for weeks, others years. One man only discovered the intruder after setting up a baby monitor and seeing a figure slither across the hallway. The terror isn't in the violence, it's in the intimacy, in knowing that someone was close, so close, breathing your air, hearing your secrets, watching you undress, that your safe space, your sanctuary, was shared without your consent. not haunted by spirits, but by someone very real and very quiet. Death by webcam. She was streaming live, smiling, laughing, lit by the soft glow of her bedroom lamp. Thousands watched as she answered questions, told stories, typed replies. It felt safe, controlled, until her smile froze. Her eyes shifted, just barely. A shadow moved behind her. The screen glitched, then went dark. This isn't fiction. In 2017, a Russian social media influencer was found dead after viewers reported seeing something disturbing during her live stream. Her door opened, though she hadn't moved. A figure appeared in the reflection. Moments later, the stream ended abruptly. Police later discovered her body in her apartment. Signs of struggle obvious. Her computer still recording. No one intervened. No one called for help. Because at first, no one believed it was real. It's happened elsewhere. A gamer in Taiwan collapsed and died during a 24-hour session while viewers made jokes in chat. Another woman in the US was assaulted on stream. Viewers argued whether it was staged. Some recorded it. Some laughed. None stopped it. What haunts most is the helplessness, that something so personal, so live, could become a stage for death, and that an audience, connected by screens, could do nothing, or worse, choose to do nothing. Webcams were meant to connect us, but they've become portals for horror. Watching without touching, observing without acting, a murder can unfold in real time and still feel like fiction, because sometimes death doesn't knock. It clicks, streams, buffers, and then with one final frame, it ends. Roadside Ghosts. It's past midnight. You're driving alone. The road is empty, swallowed in fog, headlights cutting tunnels through the dark. That's when you see her, standing at the shoulder in a pale dress, head bowed, arms wrapped around herself like she's cold. You slow down, maybe even stop. Something feels wrong, but you open the door anyway. She says nothing, just slides into the back seat. And then she's gone. All over the world, people have seen her. Sometimes she's a young girl, other times an old man with sunken eyes, always alone, always vanishing. These aren't just campfire tales. In 1970s Chicago, dozens reported picking up a woman near Resurrection Cemetery. They described the same face, the same silence, the same disappearance just before the car reached the gates. Police even questioned drivers who swore they weren't hallucinating. In Thailand, a motorcyclist crashed and survived, claiming a woman clung to him as he rode, her hands ice cold, her breath on his neck. No one else was found. What chills most is the intimacy. The ghost doesn't scream, it doesn't chase, it sits with you, in your car, breathing your air, sometimes crying, sometimes smiling, as if it remembers being alive. We spend our lives speeding down roads, always moving forward, but some spirits can't let go. They wait on highways and back roads, hitchhiking between memories. They don't want to hurt you. They just want to be seen, remembered, taken home. And when you look in your rearview mirror, ask yourself, are you still alone? Over Town Bridge in the rolling hills of Dumbarton, Scotland, there stands a stone bridge, beautiful, moss-covered, stretching high above a rocky ravine. But this bridge is not remembered for its architecture. It's remembered for death, not human death. Dogs, dozens, maybe over 100, all leaping to their deaths from the same spot. No leash, no push, no warning, just a sudden, violent jump, always from the right-hand side, always between the last two parapets. Locals call it the Dog Suicide Bridge. Since the 1950s, reports have poured in. Perfectly healthy, happy dogs running across the bridge, pausing at that cursed section, and then leaping, without hesitation, into the rocks below. Some survive, broken and bleeding, only to return to the bridge and try to jump again. Owners describe it as a switch flipping in their pet's brain, joy turning to madness, and always in the same place. Scientists have blamed the scent of mink below, triggering a hunting instinct. but that doesn't explain the consistency, the repetition, the compulsion. Some believe the bridge lies on a thin place, where the veil between the living and the dead stretches too thin. The nearby Overton house is said to be haunted. Grief clings to the land. A woman once threw her baby from the bridge, claiming he was the Antichrist. She tried to follow. What haunts the soul isn't just the deaths, it's the mystery, the unshakable feeling that something calls from below, that the bridge doesn't just overlook the ravine, it invites it, and whatever waits beneath does not like to be alone. Exorcism of Anneliese. Michelle was a devout young woman from a small German town, raised with faith, music, and quiet discipline. But when she turned 16, something began to change. She experienced violent seizures, then hallucinations, dark, taunting voices that told her she was damned, that she would rot in hell. Doctors diagnosed epilepsy and psychosis. Medications were prescribed, none of them worked. Her condition worsened. She stopped eating. She hissed at crucifixes. She spoke in voices that weren't hers, languages she had never learned. She described visits from Satan, from Judas, from demons that clawed at her skin from the inside. Her face twisted into grimaces of pain. Her knees bled from hundreds of self-inflicted genuflections. Her parents, broken and desperate, turned away from medicine. They turned to the church. Over 10 months in 1975 and 1976, Anneliese endured 67 exorcisms. Her voice growled, her body convulsed. She screamed until her throat tore. She claimed to be possessed by Lucifer, Nero, Cain, Hitler. The tapes exist. You can still hear them, ragged, snarling cries that sound less like a girl and more like a creature choking on its own rage. She died of starvation at 23, weighing just 68 pounds. Her death led to a trial that shook the country. Her parents and the priests were charged with negligent homicide, but the debate still lingers. Was she mentally ill or truly possessed? Science says one thing, faith says another, but the sound of her voice, that doesn't feel like either. It feels like something we weren't meant to hear, something that still echoes. Demon House. In 2011, a modest rental home in Gary, Indiana, became the epicenter of something so chilling, even seasoned police officers refused to enter without backup. Latoya Ammons moved in with her 3 children, unaware she had stepped into something ancient and malevolent. Within days, flies swarmed the windows in winter. Wet footprints appeared on floors with no source. Then came the voices, the growling, the shadows that moved without light. Her children began to change. One was thrown across a room by an unseen force. Another spoke in deep, guttural tones, describing things he couldn't possibly know. During a hospital visit, a nurse watched in horror as one child walked backward, up a wall. Up. The ceiling lights flickered. The room turned cold. Staff ran from the room, shaken. Police were called. So were priests. The local Department of Child Services investigated. A caseworker entered the basement with police, only to feel pressure on her chest that grew until she couldn't breathe. She later reported hearing footsteps in her home for weeks. Officers' radios malfunctioned inside the house. One took photos and found strange skeletal faces in the window where no one stood. A priest from the Catholic Church conducted several exorcisms. Latoya moved. The house sat empty. Eventually, it was purchased by paranormal investigator Zach Bagans, who tore it down after claiming it affected everyone who entered. What made the demon house unforgettable wasn't the flickering lights or the creaking floorboards. It was the witnesses, the professionals, the skeptics who walked in and came out believers, changed, terrified, marked, human remains in food. It starts as a bite, something chewy, unusual. You pause, poke at it with your fork, thinking it might be gristle or a bone. Then you see it, a fingernail, or worse, a tooth. The realization is slow, sickening. You've just eaten part of a person. This horror is not urban legend. It has happened. In 2012, a customer at a restaurant in Florida bit into a burger and discovered a human fingertip, severed when a worker accidentally sliced their hand during prep. No one stopped the food from being served. In another case, airline passengers were horrified when a man found a tooth in his in-flight meal. No employees were missing any. No one could explain it. And sometimes, the truth is darker. In 2015, reports emerged from India of a hotel owner arrested after police discovered human flesh stored in the kitchen freezer, meat quietly cooked and served to unsuspecting guests. In Japan, a performance artist hosted a dinner where he served his own amputated genitals, an event disturbingly legal under certain loopholes. The guests knew, they smiled, they paid. There's something uniquely vile about this violation. Food is trust, nourishment, intimacy. To eat is to live, but to unknowingly consume human remains is to cross into a primal nightmare. It undoes something deep in the psyche. You chewed, you swallowed, and now someone is inside you. The line between hunger and horror is thin, and sometimes you don't know you've crossed it until it's far too late. Death of Elisa Lam. Elisa Lam was a 21-year-old college student on a solo trip to Los Angeles in 2013, staying at the infamous Cecil Hotel, a place already steeped in a history of suicides, murders, and whispers of the grotesque. She called her family every day, posted bright, thoughtful blogs until she vanished. For weeks, no one knew where she went. Then came the elevator footage. The surveillance video from the hotel's elevator showed Elisa acting in a way that was both deeply strange and profoundly disturbing. She pressed multiple buttons, peered into the hallway as if someone or something was there. She stepped in and out of the elevator, hid in a corner, gestured oddly with her hands. The elevator doors stayed open far too long, as if frozen in time. Her behavior was erratic, terrified, and eerily childlike. Then she disappeared. 2 weeks later, guests began complaining of water pressure, a foul taste, black water. Maintenance opened the rooftop tanks and found Elisa's nude body, floating face down, her clothes nearby. The tank was sealed, its hatch too heavy for her to have lifted alone. No ladder, no sign of how she got there. The roof was locked, alarmed, inaccessible, and yet she was inside. The official cause of death, accidental drowning. No drugs, no trauma, no explanation. Just a young woman, alone, found in a place she should never have been. What chills isn't just her death, it's the silence it left behind, the footage, the questions, the feeling that she didn't die alone, that something unseen walked the halls with her, rode that elevator, and led her to the water, something that smiled as she vanished. The Doodler. In the early 1970s, San Francisco was still healing, from war, from hate, from the echo of the Zodiac. But something else lurked in the quiet corners of the Castro district. He was charming, polite, soft-spoken. He'd sit at bars, napkins in hand, sketching portraits of men who caught his eye. He was handsome, calm, a gentleman, and then he killed them. They called him the Doodler. He targeted gay men, offering drawings, conversation, companionship. Victims were later found mutilated along beaches and in hotel rooms, their bodies marked by rage. Some were stabbed dozens of times. Some were left posed. Police believed he had as many as 16 victims, but no one came forward. Not really. 3 men survived his attacks. One was a well-known public figure, another a diplomat. They refused to testify. Fear of being outed outweighed the urge for justice. And so the Doodler vanished into silence, never arrested, never named, still out there, his sketches forgotten in drawers, his crimes buried under decades of shame. What haunts isn't just the violence, it's the silence around it, that the victims were failed, not just by a killer, but by a world that told them their lives weren't worth protecting, that who they loved made their deaths easier to ignore. The Doodler didn't just draw faces, he erased them. He fed on loneliness, on trust, on a system that turned its back. And somewhere, perhaps, he still walks, older, quieter, his hands still steady with a pen, sketching, watching, waiting. Boy in the box. In February 1957, a cardboard box was found abandoned in a wooded area of Fox Chase, Philadelphia. Inside was the body of a young boy, naked, bruised, his hair crudely chopped as if to hide his identity. He was about 4 or 5. No name, no missing child report matched his description. No one came forward. He became America's unknown child. His tiny body was carefully laid in a JCPenney bassinet box, wrapped in a flannel blanket, like someone once cared, before the violence. Autopsy revealed signs of starvation, beatings, and healing wounds. Someone had hurt him over time, not just once. His fingerprints were taken, his face sketched, and posted across the nation. Thousands of tips. None led anywhere. Detectives wept over his case. Volunteers buried him with donations. A gravestone read, "Heavenly Father, bless this unknown boy." But peace never came. For over 60 years, he remained a haunting symbol of innocence discarded. Then, in 2022, DNA genealogy gave him back his name, Joseph Augustus Zarelli, a child finally known. But even with a name, the horror remains, because justice never followed. No arrests, no clear story, just more pain unspooled from silence. What chills deepest is how easily a child vanished, not just from a home, but from memory. For decades, no one claimed him, as if he never existed, but he did. He laughed once, played, trusted someone, and then he was left in a box, not hidden, not buried, just thrown away. Tamam Shud case. He was found slumped against a seawall on Somerton Beach, Adelaide, in 1948, well-dressed, shoes polished, no wallet, no ID. His face was peaceful, almost asleep, but he was dead. No wounds, no poison detected, just gone. In his pocket was a tightly rolled scrap of paper with 2 haunting words, Tamam Shud, Persian for, "It is finished." The world was baffled. The mystery deepened when investigators found a hidden pocket in the man's pants containing a copy of the Rubaiyat, the same book the paper scrap had been torn from. Inside the book was a bizarre code scrawled across a page, a tangled sequence of capital letters, some crossed out, some doubled. No one has ever cracked it. A phone number scribbled in the book led to a local woman. When shown the dead man's face, she nearly fainted. She claimed not to know him, but her reaction said otherwise. Hidden love? Espionage? A secret affair wrapped in silence? To this day, no one knows. For decades, his identity remained a ghost. No match in missing persons databases, no family stepping forward. His DNA, only recently analyzed, hinted at a name, Carl Webb, but that answer brought no closure, only more questions. The Tamam Shud case lingers because it feels designed, too precise, too poetic. A man with no name, a poem as a farewell, a message meant for someone who never spoke. It wasn't just a death, it was a riddle, and in that silence, it still whispers, "It is finished." But no one truly knows what began. Aokigahara Recordings. At the base of Mount Fuji lies a forest so dense, so still, it swallows sound. The trees grow tightly together, blocking wind and light. Compasses spin uselessly on the magnetic ground. Locals call it the Sea of Trees. The world knows it by a darker name, Aokigahara, the Suicide Forest. Every year, people travel here to die. Dozens of bodies are recovered annually, some hanging from trees, others curled beneath roots, surrounded by goodbye notes and forgotten belongings. But some are never found. Only their tents remain, and sometimes their voices. In recent years, explorers and journalists have brought cameras and audio recorders into the woods. What they've captured defies understanding, whispering in languages no one present speaks, static that morphs into sobbing, distant music where no one else is walking. Some recordings feature voices calling for help after the search teams have already passed through. One man caught audio of footsteps behind him, perfectly in sync with his own, until he stopped walking, and the footsteps didn't. Even more terrifying are the personal tapes found near the bodies, audio diaries, last messages. In one, a young woman calmly explains her choice, her breath steady, her voice soft, until halfway through she stops, then whispers, low and panicked, "Something is here." The recording ends with a scream. Her body was never recovered. What chills to the bone isn't just the death, it's the forest silence, the way it keeps the dead, the way it speaks when no one is there. Aokigahara doesn't just witness grief, it absorbs it, and sometimes it whispers it back. Killer Pet Monkey. It started with a bond, deep, strange, almost maternal. Charla Nash had known Travis, a 200-pound chimpanzee, since he was a baby. He wore clothes, ate at the dinner table, drove a car, watched TV. He was family. Sandra Harold, his owner, bathed him, cuddled him, and treated him like a human child. But Travis wasn't human, and one day he remembered. In 2009, Travis escaped the house and became agitated. Sandra called her friend Charla to help calm him. What happened next was a massacre. The chimp attacked Charla the moment she stepped out of the car, ripping off her face, her eyelids, her lips, her nose. He tore off her hands, bit through bone. The 911 call is harrowing, Sandra's voice cracking as she screams, "He's eating her!" Police shot Travis after he opened a cruiser door and tried to attack them too. He died in the house, soaked in blood and surrounded by broken furniture and silence. Charla survived, but she was left blind, disfigured beyond recognition, her face so destroyed that even doctors wept. She later received a full face transplant, but no surgery could erase the memory of what Travis had done. This wasn't just a tragic attack, it was a brutal reminder. Wild animals, no matter how beloved, do not stay tame. Travis had lived like a person, but he was never one. Beneath the clothes, beneath the smiles, was something unpredictable, primal. The line between pet and predator was paper thin, and when it tore, it did so with teeth. Coffin Births. In the cold, silent stillness of a morgue, something stirs. It begins with a swell in the abdomen, an internal pressure that has nothing to do with life, but death's last cruel trick. Days after a pregnant woman dies, her body undergoes decomposition. Gases build, pressure rises, and sometimes, so rarely, so grotesquely, the unborn child is forced from her womb, pushed out, not by labor, but by rot. This is known as a coffin birth. It sounds impossible, unthinkable, but it's real. Documented across centuries, the earliest recorded case dates back to the 16th century. In 2008, archaeologists uncovered a medieval grave in Italy, the skeleton of a woman, and between her legs, the tiny bones of a fetus. She hadn't given birth, not in life. Coffin births aren't true births, they're expulsions. The body, in its final breakdown, mimics delivery, but instead of soft blankets and hospital lights, it happens in darkness, in dirt, in silence. The mother is still, her face long forgotten, but her body moves just enough to release what it can no longer hold. There's something deeply disturbing about it, a life that never lived, delivered into death, a child born not into cries and light, but into shadows and stillness. There's no heartbeat, no breath, just the echo of what could have been. And the question lingers, is it nature finishing what it started, or something else? Something reaching from beneath the soil, reminding us that death too has its rituals. Some births come from pain, others from decay. Morgue mistakes. They called her dead, cold, gone, no pulse, no breath, zipped her into a body bag and wheeled her to the morgue. But hours later, she screamed. It sounds impossible, something out of horror fiction, but morgue mistakes are terrifyingly real. In 2018, a South African woman was declared dead after a car crash. Her body was taken to the morgue. Hours later, a staff member heard muffled sounds from inside the refrigeration unit. She was alive, terrified, trapped in the cold with corpses, waiting to be embalmed. She had been pronounced dead by paramedics who didn't check closely enough. She isn't alone. In Brazil, a newborn declared stillborn was found crying in a morgue drawer. In the U.S., an elderly woman was zipped into a body bag and taken to a funeral home, where she suddenly started breathing, shocking the staff. In Venezuela, a man woke up just before his autopsy began, eyes fluttering open as the scalpel touched his chest. What unnerves most isn't just the horror of waking up in a morgue, it's the trust. We trust doctors to know when life ends. We trust the cold to hold only silence. But life can be cruelly persistent. Sometimes the line between alive and dead blurs, and sometimes people wake up on the wrong side. Imagine the terror, darkness, ice, the smell of death around you, no voice to scream, no air to breathe, just the sound of your own heartbeat, slow, fading, fighting to be heard one last time. And no one's listening because they've already given up. Haunted paintings. They hang silently, unmoving, yet somehow alive. Their eyes seem to follow you, their mouths pressed in a knowing line. And when the room is quiet, too quiet, you swear something shifts. A brushstroke bends, a figure moves. Haunted paintings aren't just myths. They are real objects soaked in sorrow, fear, and something deeper, something aware. One of the most infamous is The Hands Resist Him, painted in 1972 by Bill Stoneham. It shows a young boy standing beside a doll with hollow eyes. Behind them is a glass door, and pressed against the glass are disembodied hands, reaching, clawing. The painting was sold, then abandoned. Its owners claimed the figures moved at night, that the boy left the frame, that they heard knocking from within the canvas. Some reported being physically ill after looking at it. Others swore they felt something standing behind them while it hung on their wall. Then there's The Crying Boy, a mass-produced portrait of a tear-streaked child that hung in thousands of homes in the UK. After a string of house fires, firemen noticed something eerie. The houses were destroyed, but the painting always survived, untouched, lying eerily intact in the ashes. So many fires, so many survivors, that tabloids dubbed it cursed. People began burning the paintings out of fear. Some said they heard the child cry before their homes went up in flames. What makes haunted paintings terrifying is that they don't just look back. They hold something: memory, suffering, intent. Art is meant to capture life, but sometimes it captures something that refuses to die. Smiley face killers. It begins the same way each time. A young, healthy man, often athletic, intelligent, well-liked, goes missing after a night out. Hours later, days later, sometimes weeks, his body is found floating in a river, lifeless, bloated, silent. Police rule it accidental. He must have fallen in drunk, they say. Nothing more. But behind those tragedies, something darker has begun to whisper. Near many of these sites, bridges, docks, remote banks, investigators have found the same thing: a crudely drawn smiley face, spray-painted on nearby walls, rocks, or trees, always eerie, always mocking, always watching. Two retired detectives, Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte, saw a pattern. Over 40 cases across 11 states, victims fitting the same profile, recovered in eerily similar conditions, and always the face, the grin, the signature. They believed it wasn't coincidence. It was coordination, a network, a group, a secret, something organized that hunted young men and made their deaths look like accidents. Law enforcement dismissed it. They called it conspiracy, urban legend. But families of the victims knew better. Their sons weren't reckless. They weren't drunk enough to drown. Some had defensive wounds. Some had traces of drugs they never took. Some were missing for days in freezing temperatures, yet their bodies were too well preserved, as if they'd only just died. The smiley face is supposed to be harmless, happy, but in these stories, it's a taunt, a grin left at the scene of grief, and in that smile, there is no joy, only a promise that someone is still out there, still painting, still watching. Real werewolves. They weren't snarling beasts under full moons, but men, flesh and blood, who believed they were monsters. Across centuries, across continents, real people have confessed to becoming wolves, not metaphorically, not symbolically. They meant it. In the 1500s, Peter Stump of Germany was executed after claiming he wore a belt given by the devil that turned him into a wolf. He confessed to murdering and eating children. His execution was savage. Head crushed, limbs torn, body burned. Townspeople believed it was the only way to stop him from changing again. He wasn't alone. In France, a wave of werewolf trials swept the country. Gilles Garnier, known as the Werewolf of Dole, was caught with blood on his mouth, having mutilated children in the forest. Witnesses claimed they saw him running on all fours, fur covering his skin. He claimed hunger drove him, and a pact with something dark. These were not simply madmen. Some had no history of violence until something inside them broke, or was broken for them. Modern psychology explains it as clinical lycanthropy, a delusion so deep the mind warps the body to match. But the killings were real, the blood was real, the fear that gripped entire villages was justified. What chills deeper than fangs is the transformation, not from man to beast, but from human to inhuman. The collapse of identity, of morality, of control. The monster isn't in the woods. It's in the eyes of someone who believes they've become something else and no longer cares what must die to feed it. The howl wasn't from the wild. It came from within. Killer grandmas. She baked cookies, wore knit cardigans. Her laugh was soft, her hands always warm. No one suspected a thing. That's what makes her so deadly, because when a grandmother kills, it shatters everything we think we know about love, trust, and safety. Dorothea Puente ran a boarding house in Sacramento in the 1980s. Sweet, silver-haired, grandmotherly. She cared for the elderly and disabled, fed them, clothed them, cashed their Social Security checks. Then she buried them in her backyard. 7 bodies were found beneath her rose bushes. She poisoned them with pills, smiling as they faded. When questioned, she said gently, "I used to be a good person," but she wasn't alone. Tamara Samsonova, dubbed the Granny Ripper, was arrested in Russia after neighbors found a headless body near her apartment. Inside her home, bloodstains, a saw, and her diary, written in chilling calm, describing how she murdered, dismembered, and boiled her victims. Over 2 decades, she may have killed more than a dozen. What makes killer grandmas unforgettable is the betrayal of archetype. Grandmothers are the keepers of comfort. They teach us to tie our shoes, whisper bedtime stories, rock us gently when the world gets too loud. But these women use that trust like a weapon. They smiled as they poisoned tea. They hugged while hiding knives. The horror isn't just in the act, it's in the disguise. Evil, when dressed in wrinkles and pearls, is even more horrifying because we never see it coming until it's too late, until the last hug becomes your last breath. Rats in the toilet, you lift the lid, the light flickers, the porcelain glows cool in the dim. Then you see it, not water, not empty, but eyes, gleaming, unblinking. Just beneath the surface, a rat, soaked and hissing, stares back from inside your toilet, and before you can scream, it launches upward. It sounds like a twisted urban myth, a story to scare kids into flushing fast. But it's real, all too real. Across cities like New York, London, and Seattle, people have opened their toilet lids to find rats, alive, furious, and climbing, bursting from the pipes like something born in nightmares. In some cases, they bite. One Norwegian man was hospitalized after a sewer rat sank its teeth into him mid-sit. In other homes, they've been found nesting in toilet tanks. gnawing silently behind bathroom walls. How do they get there? Rats are master contortionists. They can squeeze through openings the size of a quarter, hold their breath for minutes, and tread water for days. City sewer systems offer them endless tunnels until one leads up the wrong bend of a pipe and into your bathroom. What makes this fear so visceral is the betrayal of sanctuary. The bathroom is where we are at our most vulnerable, naked, exposed, unguarded. It's supposed to be clean, controlled, safe. But when a snarling creature erupts from the shadows of the bowl, all of that is shattered. The horror isn't just the rat. It's the thought that beneath every flush, behind every drain, something might be clawing its way toward you, quietly, patiently, already here, cannibal in the attic. For weeks, things had been disappearing, small at first. Food from the fridge, crumbs on the counter, then came stranger signs, thudding above the ceiling, a faint creak of floorboards when no one was home. The homeowner thought he was losing his mind, but the truth was worse than madness. It was presence. In Japan in 2008, a man set up security cameras after sensing something was wrong. What he saw shattered the boundary between fear and reality. A woman, alive, emerging from a cupboard in his ceiling. She moved only when he left. She ate his food, used his shower, slept curled in the dark above his life. She had lived there, undetected, for a year. But the horror doesn't end with voyeurism. In other real cases, like the story of Joseph Nasso or Carl Tanzler, hidden dwellers didn't just observe, they consumed, they obsessed, they kept remains. One man was found to have been secretly living in a family's attic, coming down at night to eat, to stare, to breathe the same air as his unsuspecting hosts. These intruders weren't spirits or legends. They were flesh and hunger, and in the most chilling tales, they weren't just squatters, they were predators. Some took food, others took pieces. A liver missing here, a heart removed there, devoured in secret. What haunts is how close the horror came, inches above, behind thin drywall. The idea that someone could be living with you, watching you sleep, eat, exist, and you never know, until the smell, until the silence breathes back, until it's too late. Cursed film sets. The cameras roll, the lights blaze, and actors recite lines on billion-dollar stages, yet behind the glamour, something else moves, something uninvited. Film sets are built to control illusion, but on some productions, horror doesn't stay in the script. It bleeds out, into real life, into death. These are the cursed film sets, where something always goes wrong, and sometimes doesn't stop going wrong. Take Poltergeist. The young star Heather O'Rourke died at 12. Her co-star Dominique Dunne was murdered. And the skeletons used in the infamous pool scene? Real human remains. Cast and crew later claimed the set felt off, cold, heavy, like something watched. On the set of The Exorcist, a fire destroyed the entire set, except for Reagan's room, the site of the possession. 9 people connected to the film died during or after production. A priest was even brought in to bless the set, twice. The omen was worse. The lead actor's plane was struck by lightning. The executive's hotel was bombed. A crew member lost his girlfriend in a horrific car crash, her decapitation mirroring a scene he had just helped shoot. It was as if the darkness on screen refused to stay fictional. Skeptics call it coincidence, but those who were there remember the feeling, something wrong in the air, in the shadows, like the veil between fiction and reality had torn, just enough to let something ancient slip through. These films didn't just tell stories of evil, they invited it, and it answered, not with screams, but with silence and death. Catacomb murders. Beneath the glittering streets of Paris lies a different world, a labyrinth of bone and silence where over 6 million souls rest in tight, endless rows. The catacombs, carved from limestone and shadow, a place of whispered dares, flickering flashlights, and breath that hangs too long in the cold. But once, someone took more than a dare. They took a life. In 2004, police discovered a secret cinema deep within the catacombs, complete with a screen, projector, seats, and a full bar. Generators hummed where no light should be, but it wasn't the equipment that chilled them. It was what they found scrawled on a note. "Do not try to find us." The group was never identified. Then came the videos. In 2010, footage emerged online, shaky, frantic, showing a man wandering the tunnels, alone, lost, breathing hard, then running, dropping the camera. The final frame, the floor, the walls, the sound of footsteps not his own. The camera was found. He wasn't. Urban explorers tell of screams in the dark, of rooms with candles still burning, and bones rearranged overnight. Some find old shoes filled with teeth. Others follow arrows marked in red, only to realize they lead nowhere, or worse, somewhere. But the most terrifying thing isn't the darkness, or the silence, or even the dead. It's the thought that someone else is down there. Not a ghost, not a memory. Someone alive, someone waiting, a killer who doesn't need to flee because no one can find them. In the catacombs, no one can hear you scream. And the bones, they never talk.